Hey, folks. Welcome to Idio Talk, emergency episode. Our first full-blown emergency that we have to deal with here. I don't even know what subtitle to give it because Idio Talk for season 1 was a Radiohead podcast. Radiohead and adjacent / adjoining projects to Radiohead. Season 2, we covered the music of Fiona Apple. Both those seasons still available to listen to in your preferred podcast app. But we hinted in our finale, not hinted, we straight up said, we put it on Front Street. There was no denying that Radiohead, I can't call it a side project, band with 2 members of Radiohead in it, The Smile.
Yeah.
We're going to have a new album that came out early in this year, 2024. That happened, I'm going to say 5 to 6 weeks ago at this point. We, of course, will get
January
into
26th.
January 26th. And I'm going to introduce the person who you hear chiming in with the facts and figures over there. And this is before I talk for 20 more minutes. But we said we would come back and do an episode after we had had some time to absorb, listen to, and cement our takes on the new Smile record. That is this episode. That makes this an emergency. Sometimes an emergency. Look, you know, the police don't always have a good response time, and neither do we. But I'm gonna introduce my co-host here after introducing myself. Boy, can you tell it's been a while since I've been in the driver's seat. But I am Walker Glenn,
and I'm Zach Glenn.
Zach, how the hell you doing?
I'm doing great, and I feel perfectly safe. You piloting, so just relax with it. That was fantastic.
Oh,
There's
thank
a
you
lot
very
to catch
much.
the listeners up on. It's been.
It's like,
while.
what is the podcast? Why is this episode coming out not in, during a season? This is the first time when we've been like, look, let's not let it ruin our vacation, but we need to get on the mics and let them know. And I also said something that I think is inaccurate. I said we had to cement our takes. Are you ever really done absorbing a Radiohead project? Or
Not
the
at all.
Smile album?
No, I think it's interesting because this is the closest to release that we have done an episode in which we discuss, an album that's been released. When we recorded our episode discussing A Light for Attracting Attention, I think that was in March or April of 2023. So the album had just under a year. I know that during our Radiohead season, which was recorded in 2022, there was, when we were talking about OK Computer, A Light for Attracting Attention had just been released. And I know on mic, the album was like a week old, and we just gestured at it, and we're like, but man, I think I said I'm going to stop short of saying I'm in love with it. So, it's been gestured at, but this is, it's February 24th, 2024 today. So the album has been released under 30 days. And like you said, cementing your takes on any sort of Tom York, Johnny Greenwood, Radiohead or adjacent project for me has always taken time. There are some that have hit me with more immediacy than others, but anyway, yeah. So
I'm curious to know when we get into the album itself, if this is one of those ones. And
me too.
I agree. Like, Tom York and company make music that thrives on an open mind, spending time with it, letting it really get into you. And so
how do you do that, Walker? Repeated listens. How does one do that?
Listens. That's right. That's right. And all I can say I have done is listen to this album a lot in the meantime. And I'm guessing a lot of the folks listening to this episode have done so as well. I do think that it's always a great time to remind people that we are not just jumping on board with the Smile now. As you said, we did an episode about A Light for Attracting Attention. We did an episode about seeing the Smile live, where we listened to live versions of all the non-album tracks, at that time non-album tracks, that we saw or heard them play rather. And so quite a few of those ended up on this record. And so I think it's very interesting to go back and hear, what kind of transferred to this album very close to how it was being played on tour, what has evolved or changed, and what did not make the album is all very, very interesting.
Yes.
So if you are somebody who follows the music of these guys as it's coming out, like we are, which, like I said, a lot of Radiohead fans listen to this podcast, make sure you go back and kind of go through that stuff with us. It's a lot of fun. And man, I mean, we are living in the smile was not something that existed to the public when we started our podcast, did it?
It did, because we started recording our podcast in January of 2022. We had been planning it some months before then, but the initial sort of release to the public, as far as where they started playing out live, primarily in England and UK, was in 2021, early summer of 2021.
I gotcha. Right,
friend and former guest of the show,
Glastonbury,
Aaron Ross,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Former guest of the show, Aaron Ross, was the individual who told me via text or in person, hey, have you heard about this, new project? And that was in May of 2021. But just some early releases and so forth prior to, I think, You'll Never Work in Television Again, like the shirt you're wearing, Walker.
Sure.
Had come out by the time we started the show. So, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And then A Light for Attracting Attention came out early in 2022?
Summer
of 2022. Okay, so we are, in terms of, what are we, like a year and a half out from that now then?
Yeah.
Okay, so all that is just a big way to wind up to say, this is not something that I expected for us to be able to, as we kind of went through Radiohead's discography and went through the solo albums and side projects and did a whole nother season about another artist, that we would be getting to sit down and talk about a release from the boys again so soon. It's just a very unexpected treat when I look back on kind of, it felt very much when we started this project that it was about looking back at this thing that we loved. And it's just great that it has turned into also getting to follow something along as it's happening.
I know, not
because no U.S. tour dates have been announced yet either. And I mean, I certainly feel that if they are, we have to do our diligence to, first of all, we have to see if Tom lives up to his promise to never play the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium again in San Francisco. And secondly, we need to find how far-reaching his ire is. Like, will he play California again?
Right.
Or is the whole state on blast? And we should definitely try to go and continue to update the public about just what Tom and Johnny are up to.
Could you imagine, dude, if he was playing California right now? Because listeners, California, along with huge parts of the country at varying intervals, but California, including Southern California, San Diego, places like that, is experiencing torrential rainstorms. And my heart goes out to anybody that may have been affected by them and losing their home or anything like that. But Tom York would be aghast if he were to play anywhere in the state.
But what, isn't it?
Yeah, listeners, this is the first. Walker just did the first of what I know will be more than a couple references to our experience seeing them live and how that sort of fits into this. But go back and listen to our episode, The Smile Live. Go back and listen to our episode discussing A Light for Attracting Attention. But in the live episode, he was. It's funny now, but he was very upset at the temperature in the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium in San Francisco, California. And it was, December 18th, I think, when we saw them. So it was just,
it's winter,
really
Tom.
Funny.
Relax.
Yes. And he would just be aghast at the fact if it was drizzling, in California. So I'm glad they're not touring right now.
Well, I mean, he's from England, famously a very dry climate.
Oh, yeah. That's where they shot Dune there.
Yeah. I like the idea that regardless of when they tour, he will just complain, did summer, and he's like, bit warm. He's just look, he's an older guy at this point, and what do old guys love more than to use the parlance of their British dialect than to whinge about things that are outside of their control? Thank God for Tom, it's manifesting in complaining about the weather and not like, other people's bodily autonomy or, like, why does everyone get a trophy now? Like there's a lot, there's a lot less cool things.
No, and it fits in totally with what his passions are that he is very passionately advocated for, spoken about, what have you in the environment. Tom is an environmentalist. So I like that is sort of now just manifesting into it. Like, how liberals get a little bit older, they get a little bit rougher around it. Not all of them, of course, but instead of, going on these tours for Greenpeace or whatever, like he did during the racer, now he's just going up to a mic and being like, it's so fucking cold here.
Yeah. I've heard of Ice Age coming, but this is ridiculous. Turn up the bloody heat. Anyway, but Zach, as excited as I am to get into this album, we would be remiss. I think this is almost kind of a double emergency episode because we talked about a band in the last few episodes. Walker, what do you mean? The Smile, the band? No, listeners, a different band, a band that probably you're not hearing as much about these days as you are The Smile or Radiohead, a band that people don't talk about too much,
Music nerds kind of know them though.
Music nerds know them, and they've had mainstream success.
Yeah.
I would say they've been going in and out of style. But they're called the Beatles, and obviously you would assume that's spelled Beetles. Also, if you're lost already, I'll slow down.
Okay.
British rock group from Liverpool. Synonymous with the 1960s, Summer of Love, Sexual Revolution, Beatlemania.
It's a great bit.
In any case, we talked about the Beatles a lot. I think we maybe even
our last couple episodes they came up, and Walker made fun of himself to be bringing up a
which is not to say that
Walker.
they don't just come up conversationally. I'm sure they have on many episodes of the podcast, and certainly have in many of our off-air conversations over the years. But with like a renewed vigor, we found ourselves discussing the Beatles a lot our last few episodes, to the point that I think we even kind of dubbed it like a recurring segment of Beatles news. Now, I don't want to take responsibility for like bringing the Beatles careening back into the public okay, honestly, I do too. I was being falsely modest, but because I noticed that since we started talking about the Beatles a lot again, all of a sudden Beatles news is popping up all over the damn place. There's like a new Beatles song for the first time since not since 1970, since 2002. Since Free as a Bird and Real Love, using machine learning algorithms to help create John Lennon's voice, isolate his vocal track from a demo he did. I think I listened to that new song exactly one time and was like, that's fine. Did you have opinions about the new Beatles song?
I felt the same way. But if I could just
please
toot our own horn a little more directly, because I'm not sure when that was released, but we were back on our bullshit, as Walker said, talking about the Beatles for our last couple episodes of our Fiona Apple season. Fiona Apple, huge Beatles lover, specifically John Lennon. Walker was talking about his experience just listening and re-listening to the Beatles catalog, watching the Beatles anthology, all that, and we capped our conversation off with a discussion about Beatles biopic. Now, we recorded that in the first week of December 2023. I think it was December 4th or 5th, whenever you were here for your show. And
the episode did great, but it didn't exactly break the internet. But little did we know Hollywood was listening.
Just to say, we did not have access to any sort of early press release about this, and it was released. The press release was released a few days ago, this week. And what is Pauly called Nostradamus in The Sopranos? He totally butchers it. He's like Notre Dame.
I don't
I'm not
remember.
saying that we're Notre Dame listeners, but yeah, it's just interesting, and there will be other.
Well, you didn't say what the press release is. You gotta.
I was gonna let you take it away.
Oh no, please! You're doing great.
Well, this week, it hit the internet that Sam Mendes and Sony, director of American Beauty, Skyfall, many great movies. He's kind of known as an upper tier director, I would say.
Revolutionary Road, 1917.
Thank you. 1917 being the high watermark for me. Sam Mendes, director, has partnered with Sony and Apple Corps to direct 4 Beatles theatrical movies on Paul McCartney, John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. That's going to be 4 individual movies covering what I've only read the one article that, we have in our notes here. So it seems to me that it's going to be telling the same chunk of time, if not extending further, but from different POVs. And I'm going to hold any thoughts on that. Walker, please elaborate if I have that sort of structure wrong at all.
No, well, I just appreciate you having the temerity to be just upfront about that we are responsible for this, because there was no talk of a Beatles biopic happening.
No, I had to calm you down. I was like, they're going to do it, Walker. And you're like, I know, but I wish they won't. And then I said, who's going to play George Harrison? Guess. And Walker, I think I may have spoiled it, but Walker was going to guess Timothée Chalamet. And that's who I said was going to. And we talked about it at length.
I remember, and podcasts, I think because it's hard to copyright ideas, and so we don't really have legal recourse at this point to stop this from happening. I wish that we had said copyright 2023 Walker and Zach Glenn Media so that they were not able to make
prediction.
But can you copyright our idea for making a Beatles bio? Because I feel like we came up with the idea of what if there was a Beatles biopic, and then we're like, this is too powerful. This shouldn't be. This idea needs to be like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark,
right?
Being rolled into.
Yeah.
What do you call that? Into the warehouse. Hide it away.
Sure. I love that.
Yeah,
shot. So great.
But they're doing.
No, you can only patent a process or an idea, or you can copyright a logo that's unique, and you can patent a process or idea that's truly unique. But it gets really hard patenting an idea, and it has to be unique. Whereas anyone, and especially people with the financial backing, and they're not necessarily copywriting it; they're just publishing it or bringing it to market. So I don't think that we could have done that.
For sure. Okay. Well, moving on then from. If it were up to us, this would maybe not be done, but it is being done. So let me ask you, Zach.
Sure.
Since this Beatles biopic it remains to be seen, something being optioned or directors being in talks or signed to a project, in no way guarantees that this will come to pass. But let's say, for the sake of argument now, that this is going to happen. Sam Mendes is directing 4 individual biopics about the 4 individual Beatles. Interesting that Stu Sutcliffe and Pete Best are not getting one. Just as I would say, just as influential over the culture as John Lennon or Paul McCartney.
Absolutely.
So let's say, though, for the sake of argument, the project, as it's being reported now, is what comes to pass. Sam Mendes directing 4 individual biopics.
Yeah.
Are you happy about this choice for how to proceed? This is a unusual approach to a band biopic. So are you happy about the 4 movies? Are you happy about the choice of director? Do you have further predictions? And do we want to see if those big air quotes coincidentally come to pass after we put this out into the world? Should we get executive producer credits on this project? Tell me everything you think about this emergency Beatles news.
Well, I've been thinking about it quite a bit and thinking about how I want to present. I've actually more been thinking about how I want to present my overall opinions on it on pod than I have my actual opinions, which is funny. But what I mean by that is I think that there's enough podcasts in the ether out there, YouTube videos, whatever, that are just people railing against things happening because they don't happen the way they want them to occur, or whatever, you know, whether it's pop music, film, politics, obviously, but I'm more talking about more pop culture stuff.
Sure.
And
I can't believe this guy's Batman now, about every casting of
like
Batman.
That. Or,
yeah.
Yeah. And, or, you know, they're making another Indiana Jones, you know, or whatever, you know, like nothing will ever ruin the Beatles music. Obviously some things could, but nothing like this would ever ruin the Beatles music to me. And I think it's a sign of getting older when you're already looking back on, you know, oh, it wasn't this way when I was, you know, in my 20s or my teens or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it's not, you know, and if things stay the same, then that's obviously a lot of things stay the same. But specifically with biopics, where I am frustrated with them is just, you know, the condensing of so many pinnacle events into one 90-minute or 120-minute chunk is really silly, because I think they have to just condense moments in time that may or may not have been magical. With this, right. I think it is wise that they are doing unconventionally, you know, 4 different movies to show different perspectives. I'm guessing that the idea behind that is to show how different each member may have perceived pinnacle moments, you know, or how they may have played out. And you see that happening in Get Back, for instance, you know, like the different interpretations over time. I think the limitations of that, though, is that 2 out of the 4 members are passed away, and the 2, you know, to lend their voice to no, and this are, and John and George, especially George, doesn't seem like he would want input on the script at all. I don't think he would care about this movie. You know, I saw Ringo and Paul are obviously being very supportive for the shit zillion dollars it'll make, but and therefore giving it their blessing. But I
think it's great, you know.
Yeah,
sounds a good bloke, American Beauty and all that.
And he's English, but
and he's English as well. Oh shit!
What?
Sorry, this is so dumb. But I don't want to give anything away. But I watched Priscilla last night. I told you, and I want you to watch it. And I want to discuss it.
Sure.
So I don't want to. But there's a part where Elvis, played by Jacob Elordi, is sitting like in a dark room, plucking on a big Fender bass. And I instantly was just like, this is Ringo's anecdote from the anthology.
Yeah.
And he was sitting there playing a Fender bass. And it was just awful, you know, because he was not doing what he was supposed to be doing. That's it.
He was just a big fat junkie.
I just was watching it with Nicole, and when it got to him kind of slumped over this bass, I like shake her, and I'm like, Ringo!
Listeners, that's Ringo's anecdote from the Beatles anthology, which was filmed over the course of 1993 to 94. And it's peak
I think they all mention the bass. It cuts to all of them.
Okay,
but interpreting different events, it's like Paul is like, oh, it's great. We met him, you know, it's the king. And then it cuts to Ringo, and he's just like, oh, it was very disappointing. And he had all these sycophants around him. And, you know, it's just the different perspective. Like the Ringo version of events is going to be, have like should have a very bleak tone.
Well, I want to kind of just wrap it up on this, like, just to say that, like, my instinct is to react negatively. And I've said it before on this show that it cracks me up, you know, that people are making biopics around individuals that, you know, have hundreds of thousands of hours of them available for free on YouTube. And, you know, there's obviously Ron Howard's documentary on the Beatles. There's the Beatles anthology. There's Peter Jackson's Get Back. I understand, though, you know, wanting to condense such historical figures into something that is more digestible, especially as Walker questioned, I think on our Fiona episode as well. He asked me, not for any data or anything, but do you think the popularity is somewhat waning? And you used an anecdote to kind of illustrate that. And that's, again, where I think we were looking like Notre Dame's a little bit, particularly you, because that thought had really not crossed my mind. I've known in my heart that somehow the rights to their lives will be acquired maybe once the final 2 pass away. Or I felt that. But my instinct to be bothered, I'm trying to temper with, but Zach, you're obsessed with the Beatles, and there's millions of people like me, you know, that are still, you know, much older, younger, or whatever. They're finding their way. But, you know, you don't need to be upset because people, they're making a biopic about it. And you also need to admit that a lot of people might find their way to great Beatles music this way, just as you had to shamefully disclose about somebody like Johnny Cash. I don't know how many new Queen fans Bohemian Rhapsody generated, but I have issues with it. I would really like to hear you speak on it, though, and we can dive deeper into those or not.
I feel exactly the same as you do. I don't know if this is just an old man shaking his fist at the sky thing, but the thing I don't understand about these biopics is I only ever hear them discussed in critically and among, just anecdotally among movie fans or whatever as a very shit formula of movie that nobody seems very excited about or into. And they've been the same exact set of beats since kind of like Ray and Walk the Line, it seems like. I do not mind a biographical movie. I wonder if I have more of an ability to enjoy it if I don't have my own preconceived idea of the subject. Like
I think that's huge.
Because I watched and enjoyed Maestro, for example, and I didn't think it was great. I thought it was a really solid, watchable, like B+ movie. It not life changing or anything, but as somebody who knew next to nothing about Leonard Bernstein, I walked away with it going, that was an enjoyable movie. I feel like I know a little more about Leonard Bernstein, and I'm also interested in it. I'm interested in him now. And so as an introductory piece on the life of this, hugely influential musical and cultural figure, I'm like, yeah, I enjoyed that. So I can transfer that over to somebody who's 15 and is like, oh yeah, Queen, that rock song with the opera singing in it. Yeah, I've heard that. Okay, I'll watch this. Oh wow, they seem really cool.
Yeah.
So I guess in that way, I'm like, all's well that ends well, but I don't see the point of these movies. I don't want to watch a bunch of like really like conventionally hot people play the Beatles. And ultimately, Zach, what this really boils down to is there's next to no chance I will ever see any of these 4 movies. I'm just not interested. And I also do not feel that it could change my relationship to the Beatles, both as people whose music has like profoundly, shaped my taste and life, but also as they kind of exist as characters to me. I have my own idea who each of these 4 guys are based on the thousands and thousands of hours of media available that I have consumed of them. That's not in danger, but I also I'm not interested in Sam Mendes's take on them, and I'm not interested in Timothée Chalamet's take on George, or whoever
should he play him.
Should he play him? Which is what I wanted to throw back to you is before we move on is since this is happening and since Hollywood seems to be listening, should we cast this thing real quick? Now, a big problem for me is the reason I picked Timothée Chalamet is because he is one of 3 young actors whose name I know. So that could be an issue in casting this thing for me. But I mean, dream casting or anything? Do you have any opinions about? And I'll even say you could go because of like the face de-aging that they have now and stuff. You could be like anyone who's alive. You can pick. Do you?
Well, I really want to respond to the things you said and then go to this but I'm just going to say, Walker, the first thing you said that really stood out to me was you said, I don't know anyone critically, or what did you say, in your circle that, or no, you said critically.
Yeah, anecdotally, I just don't know anyone who's like, what movie I fucking loved was Rocket Man or whatever. Like no one seems to really like these movies that much, but they must make good money. Because they keep making them.
Yes, that's the key thing, though, is there are hit and miss ones, and that's where I am comfortable kind of airing my grievances a little bit more. Sam Mendes is an amazing artist. I mean, he's worked with, I don't want to go through his catalog. He's an incredible director. He knows what he's doing. So I think that win in the win column for these, they make money, and not all of them. And it's a sign, and listeners, Walker and I are not film critics or film analysts or whatever. But there's a channel I love, Broe Deschanel. She's a Canadian actress, and she analyzes contemporary film and then different movements in film. I love her channel. She has an amazing video on the modern biopic that she's really sour on. She's a northern neighbor. She's Canadian, like I said. So she's just very warm tone, but she comes across, she's very critical. And one of her videos on the modern biopic is so interesting. It just condenses so well, I think, what probably a lot of Walker and I's collective issues are, which is, to me, it's such a waste of monumental talent. Not a complete waste, but as somebody who's not an actor, but I really, really appreciate good acting, to me, where I get sad for it is, in my mind, acting is not about an impression. It's about inhabiting a character. Now, as a non-actor, I'm sure an actor would, say to me, no, I'm inhabiting the character of Maestro or, of whomever, of Freddie Mercury or what. I mean, I will concede, as bad of a movie as I think Bohemian Rhapsody is, not only does Rami Malek look like Freddie Mercury, somebody who is impossible to resemble, but obviously his movements and all that. So I don't deny it. But to me, I mean, we have a Whitney Houston biopic coming out this year. We have a Michael Jackson biopic coming out this year. A Bob Marley biopic has already come out this year. And I understand if I were an actor trying to make it, usually these are unknowns. The Bob Marley gentleman had acted in other films, but acting is so, the best actors to me, Julianne Moore in May December, Jodie Foster, or Viola Davis, or other male actors you could think of, sure. They become,
I like this
character.
De Niro guy.
De Niro, thank you. Yeah, or they fill in the life with their own imagination or with the help of the writer or whatever. And it's not. I don't mean to be so up my own ass with this, but it's not exciting to me to watch who can do the best impression of somebody when I can watch Paul play my favorite song in the studio, on the album, live through any decade, or John or Ringo or George. And it just seems like a waste of talent directorially, of all the craftspeople that work on it, makeup, hair. Like, why write something original? And this is such a tired thing to rail against, but they make money, and they don't all. But I just wish that there were more new ideas being brought to the forefront for these A-list directors. And there are. That's the other thing that I want to circle back to. So this isn't a rant podcast. There are so many great movies that came out in 2023. I think the strongest year since COVID. And obviously we're into 2024 now. Some amazing movies have been released this year too. So, this is not the death of Hollywood. The industry is changing, and less, dramas or melodramas maybe are making a shit zillion dollars or comedy or whatever. But that's the other thing I keep telling myself, is that why waste your time being upset about something that is being made when there's other great things?
Do you think they will include the story that Paul inexplicably revealed a few years ago, that they all like jerked off together? And then Ringo...
did you know that?
And then Ringo said in an interview, by the way, listeners, if you think I'm making this up just to make it immature, look it up. And then Ringo was asked about it, and he said, "That happened before I joined the group."
Did you know that Paul and John were in the room when George lost his virginity?
I've read that as well, yeah.
I could see them putting something like that in there, because it doesn't, the way it came out was, it wasn't like some horrible assault. Who knows? Anything's possible, but it wasn't a horrible assault thing. The lights were all off, but it was more a sign of, because this is before they'd made it big, before Hamburg, they were all sharing one room. Right. And with the jerked off thing, I mean, boys do crazy stuff, and, often, it could lead to worse stuff, but stuff like that, it's like, I'm like, yeah, it's not that crazy, especially if you're all teenage boys sharing one room.
No, it's not that crazy. But it's funny to talk about, and it's funny that Ringo clarified that it happened before he joined. So totally that would be funny if we see that from all the different perspectives, and like from in the Paul movie, Ringo's there, and then in the Ringo movie, he's not there, but he just like heard about it. Like those would be the interesting things.
I think what they'll mess with POV wise will be the relationship between John and Paul and their independent partners or wives, and the way they perceive them differently. Like maybe from Paul's movie, it'll show that, everybody's quite cruel to Linda, and then John will be, everyone's racist to Yoko, because I could see them including something like the letter that Paul wrote. This is in his biography many years from now, and in other sources, The Beatles by Bob Spitz, Paul, one of the only skeletons in his closet that there's no denying, I think context matters but doesn't excuse it, is he wrote a letter to John and Yoko in which he used multiple racial slurs referring to Yoko's Japanese or Asian identity that we're not going to mention them.
Wow, I did not know that.
The reason why it's not been a bigger deal is because it was during the time in which Paul and John were friends again, post Beatles, and he was friends with Yoko. So while this doesn't excuse it, and I'm not saying it was different then, but it's a sign of the times, I think, because it's a letter to them, and he refers to it, which is wrong and is unequivocally wrong.
Right, but he thinks he's being.
Yes, fun. It's not an assault on her. He
thinks he's being funny or whatever.
He thinks he's being funny, but John then later did say that was super offensive, and he's right. So I could see them including stuff like that doesn't besmirch the character, but you could see from different points of view. But that's not interesting to me. It's interesting to read it in a book and to hear it analyzed by a Beatles expert. Not Sam Mendes and $1 billion budget.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So that's how I feel.
Well, let's cast this thing.
Right,
I mean, do we leave again? This is hard because no. Okay, we're allowing you can de-age people, and honestly, also with
they're going to go with young 20-somethings or 30-somethings.
I'm just saying, if you're like, look, De Niro must play Ringo, like that you can do it.
Okay. Can I go first?
Yeah, please.
Okay, who is the person who plays Elvis in Sofia Coppola's new movie?
I was thinking Jacob Elordi's got to be in this. Yeah,
I was thinking him for John. Who's your John?
Okay, I was seeing. For some reason I'm having the hardest time thinking of someone for John, because I think like John is.
Wait, are we thinking of what's a good idea or who they'll actually cast or try to get?
We are casting it.
Oh, and then
we're in charge. Like we fucking got this
charge.
thing made in the first place. Right. Like when we come back, we'll be like, oh, interesting. They went with all our choices.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, John, go ahead.
I see Jacob Elordi as in this thing, but I see him as a little more Paul
or George Martin.
Yeah,
totally play George Martin with a
yeah, but
I was Paul.
That's true, but I just think like it's like I don't know. I mean, he's way hotter than anyone in the Beatles, but like that's how these things are cast. So I just like
John was a pretty good looking guy.
I'm not saying any of them aren't good looking guys. I'm just saying that it's like, people like, your average character actor now is hotter than like the supermodel of the 1960s. All anybody did was smoke and eat red meat. Like everyone looked like shit.
Yeah. Paul Newman being the exception.
Yeah. But okay, so
sorry.
I think for Ringo, you go with Paul Mescal.
Remind me who
Mescal.
That is?
He's somebody who I was completely unaware of the existence of like 6 months ago, and now I see his name constantly. He's an Irish actor. I mean, he doesn't look like Ringo Starr.
I know. Yeah, I'm familiar.
But he's got a beak, I've seen him in one movie, Foe. The movie was not good, but his performance was fine, and I think he's supposed to be good, and I think he looks
Walker.
enough.
He would be a great Paul McCartney.
You think Paul has a little button nose?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying for Paul.
No, I was saying Paul Mescal for Ringo because he's got the beak.
Okay, I already have my Ringo picked out, so I'm gonna go.
Who's
Paul
your
Mescal
Ringo?
For Barry Keoghan.
Oh, I like that.
That's my Ringo. I'm going Paul Mescal for Paul McCartney, and I'm going Jacob Elordi either for George Martin or for John, and Timothy Chalamet for George.
Okay, I'm going Barry for Ringo. I like that. Timothy Chalamet for George. Paul Mescal for John. Jacob Elordi for Paul.
All right. I think the mistake there, and I know height, makes a huge difference, or whatever. There have been actors who are much shorter or taller, depending.
Yeah,
on
they'll
who
put them on
playing,
apple boxes.
No, Jacob Elordi's 6'5".
Yeah, but that's easy enough. You just put other people on platforms.
Right. But I was going to say the reason why I think he would play John or George Martin better is because I think John was only 5'11", but he looks a lot taller in a lot of the photos because he was so lanky. And I do think he was the tallest member of the Beatles, actually. And George Martin was 6'2", I think. So he could play. I think that they're going to play to his height. And that's why I think that because especially when John got really thin in the back half of the Beatles, he just looks taller.
Yeah, but
so I think
Jacob Elordi is like a big emergent star right now. He's not playing fucking George Martin. If we're getting him in this thing, he's got to be one of the Fab Four.
That's true. So yeah, I just think he could be good casting as him. I don't know enough young hot actors, honestly, though, to cast this with any degree of. And I could see them doing 4 unknowns too.
Wait, what if we do it like they did in Straight Outta Compton, and we get the little George Harrison, and does Paul McCartney have a son?
Yes, I was going to say, besides George Harrison's son, who I haven't seen him in many years, but incredibly
and as John Lennon, Julian Lennon.
Dude, you beat me to it. I was going to say Paul and John's kids. It's that thing where two beautiful people get together because I think Linda McCartney was a beautiful woman. I think Yoko Ono was and is a beautiful woman. Their children, unfortunately, just didn't inherit their parents' good looks.
Oh, I think people would say Sean Lennon is good looking.
Sure. Okay. Maybe. Yeah. Paul's son. God, I don't want to be unkind, but have you seen Paul's son?
Well, I didn't know he existed until moments ago.
Oh my God. You got to look at it right now. Can I wait?
But I mean, George Harrison's kid, George Harrison.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Sexiest Beatle, and he looks just like him.
Handsome as fuck. Listeners, if you want to get a quick snapshot of him, go to Prince playing, or go to While My Guitar Gently Weeps at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction from 2004. It's Tom Petty, a lot of other musicians, George Harrison's son, and Prince playing the song, and you could see a lot of shots of George Harrison's son. Very handsome.
Wait, okay. Oh, okay. Yes, I have seen this.
I know. It's kind of a Harrison Ford son situation. We're like, God, I wonder what Harrison Ford's son looked like. Lucky dog. Oh my goodness.
It's like his eyes, nose, and mouth are Paul McCartney's, like put onto like the most giant balding head you've ever seen.
It's so funny.
It looks like if you made like a Paul McCartney Mr. Potato Head.
It looks like if like you had like a child that was showing aptitude for drawing, we're like, draw me Paul McCartney. And you're like, oh yeah, that's close. But he has a stronger chin.
He's a 6-year-old drawing of Paul McCartney.
Yes, he's a 6-year-old drawing of Paul McCartney.
Well, I think we did it.
Well, we don't agree on. No, we don't have to agree. But I'm thinking, let's just cast Brian.
But wait, what's Ice Cube's son's name again? Because it's bugging me. I can't remember.
It's like Shay something.
Yeah, Shay. I like him too. Fuck, what's his name?
If only there was a way.
I'm looking it up. O'Shea Jackson Jr.
You know what he was great in besides Straight Outta Compton was Ingrid Goes West as the. I loved it that he was
he was obsessed with Batman Forever.
Yes, he was like a black nerd. He reminded me of me so much. I was like, I love that they have a black dude in this film that's just like a nerd. Like what a great
Well, it was
character.
just a funny runner that he wasn't obsessed with Batman in general. He was obsessed with Batman Forever in particular.
Yes, listeners, please watch one of the greatest movies on social media commentary I think ever made, because just want to highly recommend it. I'm not saying it's one of the best movies ever made, but I think it makes its point around influencer culture and our obsession with people we don't know, much like this podcast.
And Zach, I was going to say, would you say that the album we're here to discuss today perhaps contains commentary about this very topic? Perhaps even in its titular track, Wall of Eyes? Okay, me either. I just wanted to throw it out there. Should we get into Wall of Eyes? I think that we stumbled upon, what I do think is a very central theme to this album.
I would love to, Walker.
So why don't you hit us with the basic stats? And, in this one, we always strive to go beyond the Wikipedia, but, information is still forthcoming, I would say, about Wall of Eyes, because we don't have history really to look back on, but we do know plenty about the when and where. So why don't you fill us in, brother?
Well, as we previously mentioned, it was released internationally on January 26, 2004. The recording locations were Abbey Road Studios in Westminster, London, plus an undisclosed location in Oxfordshire. I thought that was interesting. The genre, this is as you just mentioned, as defined on Wikipedia or whatnot, but I always find this so interesting what genres music is classified to. Art rock, check. Progressive rock, check. Post rock, okay. Experimental rock. Anything to add on that?
The prog rock label is interesting. Somebody who I'm a big fan of, who, as far as I know, is not a musician in any capacity himself, but I just think is great as a music commentator, is Tom Sharpling. And I was listening to his weekly show. It was a radio show for years and now exists as a podcast, The Best Show. And he has just a ton of obscure music knowledge, but he's also, not surprisingly, a big fan of Radiohead and, Radiohead related projects. And he was talking about this new album and just saying, what I love about this record is they're not pretending they don't like prog rock anymore. Now, I don't really know a ton of prog rock. I definitely know the things that I'm into that I think touch upon it. Stuff like, I suppose Pink Floyd comes to mind, and off the top of my head, I can't think of maybe like Pinback, I would say, has some like prog rock influence. Mars
Volta.
Oh, Mars Volta, very much so. So there you go. But, prog rock is not something that does a ton for me in terms of like my kind of mainstream understanding of it. The bands that come to mind for me are like Yes, Rush, King Crimson.
King Crimson. Have you gotten into King Crimson ever?
No, and none of these are bands that I would say I know a lot of deep cuts of. But Tool, yeah. So all that to say, not super my thing, but it is something that I see mentioned a lot in the reviews that I've read of this album. And I don't often hear Radiohead described as prog rock. And I also haven't heard that label be invoked a lot about A Light for Attracting Attention either. But if it's something that they're into and they're wearing it on their sleeve a little more with this one, that's fun. I like that. I like that this keeps evolving.
Yeah, I think that there's at least 3 in my mind, if not 3.5 songs that I would define as kind of prog rock, because I was more thinking post rock. Walker, you're forgetting Peter Gabriel though, being one of the biggest artists that people generally throw into a progressive rock category of his time, at least. And he was in the band Genesis, who are a prog rock group.
And I would say I'm not a big Genesis fan, and I'm more into Peter Gabriel's, the more pop oriented part of his career than the first 4 records.
And listeners, we'll move faster through each category than this, but I also want to say
we'll stop and each word we will define for 15 minutes.
I found it in Pitchfork and Mojo article that I'm going to reference kind of throughout. I forget which article in particular, but cited King Crimson, who I'm a huge fan of. Porcupine Tree, I had the opportunity to see here in Sacramento, Davis, California, late last year, with a friend of the show, Paul Rios. And it was, I'm not going to say that, The Smile or Johnny Greenwood or in particular are drawing upon maybe even Frank Zappa a little bit. He's definitely thought of as I could see Johnny Greenwood really being a Zappa fan. I'm not sure. But yeah, I was just wondering, post rock. What does post rock even mean?
Yeah, I mean, to me, post rock sounds like it's just if you are taking what was traditional conventions of rock and roll and experimenting with them. That would be my guess. Let's see what the Wikipedia says. Post rock is a form of experimental rock characterized by a focus on exploring textures and timbres as well as non-rock styles. So
got it.
That's a pretty general term, but I would definitely say every Radiohead project from the Bends onward has fit into that category. The other thing, when you were bringing up influences that are referenced for the dozenth time, I would say this band is referenced in every review of Radiohead from Kid A on. Is the group Can is always referenced. And Zach, I think we really got to check out Can at some point, because I still have never listened to them. But
I can and I will.
That's why they named themselves that. But yeah, it's constantly referenced in regards to Radiohead and subsequent projects. So I got to check them out at some point.
Well, I like
that,
that
in the reviews of this album as well.
Excuse me. Sorry. I like that we're talking about the prog rock, ahead of time, because that's something I want to elaborate on as we listen to the tracks. Going to the length of this album. It's 8 tracks long. It's 45 minutes, 16 seconds long. Walker, do you happen to know the length of A Light for Attracting Attention?
I'm going to guess 48 minutes.
53 minutes, 18 seconds.
Okay.
So, I think there's 13 tracks, I want to say, on A Light for Attracting Attention. This is an 8-track album. So not only do we have, less tracks, but we also have, an 8 minute, and 8 minutes is a lot, whether that would have comprised 2 songs or 3, who knows, but just a little bit of a tighter album, we'll discuss to its benefit or detriment later on.
But I don't think there's a song under 5 minutes in length on this album.
I'm not sure, but they're all right around 4:40 to 5 minutes. I agree. Yeah. I'm not sure, but I agree. It was released under XL Recordings. Listeners, we've talked about XL at length, but the largest sort of independent label for kind of big acts, but also indie acts. It's like their Sub Pop Records. Would you say, Walker?
Yeah, it's like the British Sub Pop.
The producer, take it away, Walker. Who do we got producing this one?
Well, it's going to shock you that they got Nigel Godrich. Wait a second. Hold on a gosh darn second. Listeners, this is a non-Nigel joint. This one is produced by Sam Petts-Davies. Now, this guy is unknown to me, but he did collaborate with Tom York previously on the soundtrack. Tom York wrote a soundtrack of original songs for the movie Suspiria that was released, 2018, if I remember right?
Yep, that's right.
And so he worked on that and just some other credits this guy has. He's produced, and I'm going to just put out there, these are all unknown acts to me, but that doesn't mean that they're not hugely influential.
Oh, he's a young bloke. He's not that experienced.
Yeah, no. I saw he's produced a few different groups: Puma Blue, Marika Hackman, Warpaint, Wavaka Gentle is what I found. But yeah, I mean, this was really surprising to me. And Zach, I'm so used to Nigel being in the behind the boards for every Tom York project, literally since the Bends. He has been. I guess with the exception of the Suspiria soundtrack, that I did not bother to check who the producer on this was. And I guess I'll just be honest with the listeners. I am finding out today that it is not Nigel Godrich. And so the last part of my research for this album was finding out about Sam Petts-Davies. There's not a ton out there. When you Google him, the first picture that comes up is a picture of Colin Greenwood. So,
but there are photos of this, Jen, and I don't want to make my co-host embarrassed here or anything, but you've talked a lot about, Walker, that there might be some bald discrimination in the Smile, that they got rid of sort of the follically challenged members and Phil, even though Nigel himself is follically challenged, but he is kind of impersonating a Bob's Big Boy. Why don't you?
You wouldn't know it from the front, would you, Zach? Because he spikes it all up, and then if he's unfortunate enough that a camera catches him from the backside, you realize that he sits on a throne of lies.
This gentleman, I mean, I don't know his age, but he looks quite young, and it's great to hear that he and Tom York had collaborated before. Obviously, same as with Tom Skinner in a way. Tom Skinner, I think, is in his early 40s, but he and Johnny Greenwood's collaboration relationship, if you will, goes all the way back to 2011 when they were recording the original score for Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master. That movie came out in 2012, but I'm saying that they composed the soundtrack in 2011. So many years before any collaboration in the form of The Smile. This person, if you're producing a Tom York and Johnny Greenwood project, obviously you have to have musical and production chops, but I'm sure your relationship goes back. They seem to like to know who they're working with in an intimate way, is what I mean to say.
You know, we already talked about our opinions about this record are probably going to continue to expand and contract as we listen to it over time. Sure. You know, I'm still getting into this album. You know, we covered the Atoms for Peace, their one record. And at the time we recorded the album, I was fairly cool on a lot of it. And then a few weeks later, when we sat down to talk about a completely different album, I was like, you know what? I kept listening to it, and I'm really, really starting to love stuff that wasn't moving me a lot. So I'm very interested to continue to listen to Wall of Eyes with a closer ear to the production differences between this and, you know, even just the Last Smile record as a Nigel production. I will say it doesn't sonically sound like a major departure to me.
No.
Having this gentleman there, but some differences that I was doing a little reading from, you know, kind of what the fan reactions were, and people have pointed out that there's less stereo panning, the bass is louder in the mix, the vocals tend to be more blended into the mix, and then my observation independently of those is just that I would say this album is defined by much sparer arrangements than its predecessor. Now, that isn't necessarily a production choice, but, you know, generally with Tom York and Johnny Greenwood, like, Nigel is a musical collaborator who is helping shape the sound of the album. He's helping, I do think, with arrangements to a large degree and helping make things sonically consistent. So I don't know if that is a Sam Petts-Davies contribution or just what this batch of songs happen to sound like, but I do think it is a defining characteristic of this album compared to the Last Smile record. In my opinion, I'll say right now, a take I have about this album, this is a small and very contained record. If that's a strength or a weakness, we'll get into, but I consider this to be sonically kind of a much slighter album than the last one.
Yeah, and, you know, I think that's all really well said, and I'm so excited to sort of hit upon the production arrangements, you know, what have you, their differences or whatever, you know, as we go through the tracks. That's a strength I think you have a little bit greater than my own, but I was aware that Nigel hadn't produced it going back to its release, just when it was released, so for the last month. And I don't know that it really informed the listens. I do just want to say, listeners, Nigel Godrich may have been unavailable because he just produced the album, the newest album by Idols. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's Tangk, Tank.
I think you're right. It doesn't sound like it's, you know, it doesn't seem, it seems that it is a scheduling conflict, and the Smile is operating at a very different. Now, Radiohead probably would have said, oh, Nigel's not available. We're not making the album right now. The Smile is operating under a different lack of kind of self-imposed time constraints, I would say, or restrictions or incubation process. We'll get into that more as we discuss the making of this album. But I do think that's a very interesting tip-off for just like one of the ways this project is very different than Radiohead is the fact that this went ahead even with a scheduling conflict with Nigel. I do also just want to say, I have not heard the most recent Idols album, but I have listened to Idols and I think they're really cool. They're like hardcore post-punk band from Bristol, England. It's cool that I'm really excited to listen to this album because that's not usually the kind of band that Nigel produces. They're really loud and really hard. And I'm curious to hear his kind of sonic sauce combined with something that brutal.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, though, it would have, if it was Radiohead, it seems to me at this point, who knows, you know, that it would, you know, Michael Jordan isn't going to, you know, play with the Bulls without Phil Jackson or whatever. It's like an automatic, it seems like, at this point.
Yeah.
So the Smile's doing something different. And the fact that it would have made more sense if he didn't produce, say, their debut album, but also not, because then it shows kind of how this is the band. The fact that Nigel produced it, even though he's produced Tom's solo projects in the past, and Adams for Peace. So I do want to just hear your insights into what you were saying, like, lack of panning or something like that, or more contained. I think I'm really excited to discuss that as we go through the tracks. But yeah, just a total departure in some ways. We're almost done with the general data.
mean, I have more to say about maybe the similarities that I hear in this album to past Radiohead projects and then the differences. So, like I said, that might be a way that I kind of hear it differently going forward. Now that I just have goddamn whiplash, man. I'm barely getting used to Tom Skinner, and now you're telling me I've got to fall in love with Sam Petts-Davies.
I know.
Just like, God, it's like mom keeps bringing home new boyfriends, and I'm getting attached to all of them.
Well, the last little bit on just general data pertaining to this album, it produced I want to say 4 singles or 3 singles. Bending Hectic, which was released in June of 2023. They had played that out live, I'm sorry. And Wall of Eyes and Friend of a Friend are the singles. Wall of Eyes and Friend of a Friend have music videos that were directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, which we can talk about now or later. But in terms of just general appraisal, I'm talking music critics, not a part of this podcast. The album received critical acclaim. It's slightly less if you're looking at a scale on, Metacritic or 1 to 100. Still universal acclaim when you net all the scores together on Metacritic, which is my preference for sort of net reviews. I believe it's an 82 out of 100. So that anything above 80 is universal acclaim. Works in a weird scale. Under, like you were saying, Walker, on the general data, whether it's beyond the Wikipedia or not, it is what it is. The album just came out, but I already talked about the recording locations. One thing that I did find interesting, though, was the strings were performed by the London Contemporary Orchestra. Tom loved recording at Abbey Road Studios in London, and lamented that it had a touristy element because of its association with the Beatles. No shit, Paul, or no shit, Tom.
Yeah.
But a lot of, Pink Floyd recorded "Wish You Were Here" there, along with "Dark Side of the Moon." I mean, just it's endless as far as the amount of talent that's come through. But the thing that I wanted to ask you about,
has Radiohead recorded there?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
Maybe parts of the Bends, but not everything else has been in their studio in Oxfordshire. They've recorded obviously parts of Hail to the Thief in Hollywood.
Yes.
And then King of Limbs at Drew Barrymore's house. But that's true, listeners. You don't have to look it up. You look in the lyric sheet in the vinyl.
Yep.
But Walker, and maybe this is not the most organic segue or not, but I did want to ask you about what you had educated me on and sent me the article link regarding sort of the pacing and recording of this album. We've already talked about it, what a short interval this is compared to their debut album. But what Johnny Greenwood had to say about the Smile sort of recording pace, backlog of ideas and all that. Do you want to talk about that or no?
Yes. I mean, this is just not how Radiohead does it.
Not since Amnesiac.
No, exactly. I mean, and those were recorded at the same time, and it was conceived as a double album that they made into 2 albums. So even that is, kind of on a technicality, right? It's shorter than the space between Pablo Honey and the Bends. So, it's just a very different approach. Radiohead has taken longer and longer between just about every album as their work goes on. So Johnny Greenwood apparently was pretty frustrated with that aspect of Radiohead. This is an excerpt from the Pitchfork review of Wall of Eyes by Jazz Monroe. And I think it's interesting that Jazz Monroe got to write this review, on an album that has some jazz influences. That's just, I don't know if that's a nepotism hire or not. But this is from that review. It says, as far back as 2009, Johnny Greenwood was fed up with the faff of the world's most studious stadium band. And this is a quote from Tom. He can't stand it anymore, the pace of the way we work. Despite the guitarist's and composer's impatience, he was prone to obsessing over what York called the extra things, the sly strings and choked squeals that thread razor wire into Radiohead's pillowed luxury. Come on, we need some wrong notes, he's always saying. Okay, you've got 'em, York joked. But never have we heard Greenwood quite like this. On Wall of Eyes, the second album from The Smile, his hostile harmonies and expediency in the studio nudge the trio somewhere new. It's his most exciting and volatile performance since In Rainbows. Let's see. So, and then this is a quote from Johnny Greenwood from a different article I found. He says, "I'm the most impatient of everybody in Radiohead. I've always said I'd much rather the records were 90% as good, but come out twice as often." So I think that's really interesting.
This is shocking. And I read this because Walker sent it to me. I can't put meaning to that. Not that I know Johnny Greenwood or anything. He's a very quiet person, very sparse in interviews. He works a ton. Of all the members of Radiohead, I wouldn't necessarily think that he is the one who felt that way.
I wouldn't either, but it sounds like there's a little bit of a contradiction here too, though, because Tom is also saying he's the one who obsesses the most about the tiny details. This is total speculation. I feel like it's speculation we've kind of got at before. I feel like this came up when we did our episode about A Light for Attracting Attention. I think that the biggest departure about The Smile from Radiohead is that it's not called Radiohead. And so there is a spirit of experimentation that they are allowing themselves that they would not on Radiohead. There are songs on this. So on this album, maybe it's like hey, like prog rock is considered kind of nerdy music. Maybe we're not going to, maybe shit ideas we have that fit under that banner are getting thrown out, that they won't fit on a Radiohead album. On the last album, We Don't Know What Tomorrow Brings is like just a straight up 4/4 rock song that, you know, it's a driving rock song that I don't think we've
from
heard
Joshua Tree.
Right, exactly. It sounds like kind of like 80s post-punk a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't think that would make it on a Radiohead album, but obviously they still have a joy for that kind of music because they're doing it on a new album. And so I wonder if, even though Greenwood is saying I was really impatient with Radiohead, I wonder if it's just more of a branding issue than anything else. There's so much pressure on Radiohead to be the most interesting band, the most interesting rock and roll band working today. And
or at least one of them.
What do you mean?
Yeah, exactly. I think the same Tool has the same expectation on them for instance, and they are break in between albums was 13 years. So I just think, even though I favor Radiohead greatly over Tool, they're in an elite class of, I would say, 3 to 5 bands that are at the age that they are.
Absolutely. And does that pressure still exist when you have 2 members of Radiohead in your band? Yes, and you can tell that they take it seriously. They're still making serious music that is being treated seriously by fans and critics, but I just think that they are getting to play in a wider sandbox. I think that there's clearly some self-imposed limits on what can be a Radiohead song based on what we're hearing from The Smile. And so I think Johnny Greenwood can be both things. He could have been sick of that and also one of the key votes and going, no, we can't do that because people will say that that's not like up to the standards of what a Radiohead record is going to sound like.
Okay, so that kind of explains the contradiction a little bit, I think. Yeah, it's like he can exist in both places. I think that's really well said and really, really great. I mean, you know, we're speculating, but yeah, I kind of struggled to understand what was being gotten at there. Was it saying like, hey, actually, I would love to go back to the rock more in Radiohead, but fucking Tom or, you know, Colin or Ed, I don't think it's that at all. I think that it's evident still by what is on The Smile that Johnny doesn't want to just play the guitar, even though there's a lot more of that on these last 2 records than there are on the previous last 2 Radiohead records, for instance. But, you know, you still hear a lot of orchestral work, obviously, in several of the songs and all that. But I'm really glad that you're able to kind of bring that to life a little bit, because it wasn't a controversial piece or like this big expose, but because he's so sparse on words and so sparse on interviews, I really wanted to find some sort of meaning in that.
That's how I take it, and that's just how I hear these projects. I think this album is more of a cohesive record than the first Smile record. That one to me is more of like a sounds, and I think that's a strength of this record, is that it to me sounds more it has a more consistent sound, in my opinion. And I think it's a strength of A Light for Attracting Attention that it sounds like a dumping ground for ideas that we've accumulated over the last few years. Both things can be great if the songs are great, right? Like, I mean, because I think Kid A and Amnesiac are wildly all over the place in terms of what kind of songs they're putting on there, but the quality is very, very high consistently. So it plays like a strength on that record, or like a strength on the White Album. I think it's less of a strength on Hail to the Thief, because those songs just maybe need a little more finessing and a little more time. So I don't necessarily prefer one thing to the other, but I do think, and in the case of the Smile and the two records we have, I think, and I'm tilting my hand a little bit, I quite like Wall of Eyes a lot. I don't mind saying that now. I think that both approaches are working really well on these different records, because I think that the songs are very spirited. They seem like they're being made with a great deal of enthusiasm. These are not guys who are under any sort of pressure to put out records when they don't want to. So the fact that we're getting them, it means that they're making music that they're excited about. And I think that comes through on both records in different ways.
Yeah, man, I love that. And I love that you tilted your hand, because I know that they're going to have a lot more to break open than that. I feel positively about Wall of Eyes too, as much as it is within my control to hold back any feelings, good or bad, that I have. I mean, you're going to hear my enthusiasm for certain songs, of course. I would kind of like to save my sort of overall thoughts for after we played the music. Before we get into that, though, there's just one last little thing I want to cover.
Yeah, please.
Which is the release and sales. We're still very early into the release and sales, obviously, or the sales at least. But this is really interesting, because this is something that Tom York and company, I would say, have engaged with since Moonshaped Pool, which, want to feel old, that's almost 8 years ago. The lifetime that the Beatles were together. It's been almost as long as since the Beatles, or since Moonshaped Pool is the Beatles' entire career, to put that into context. But what I was saying that Tom and crew have done is collaborate with Paul Thomas Anderson, right? We had the music videos for Moonshaped Pool, and then we have them obviously here as well. So in January of this year, The Smile held a series of screenings at independent cinemas around the world titled Wall of Eyes on film, which is really cool. P.T. Anderson's kind of a film purist, so they were on actual film, or they were shot that way at least. The events included listening parties for the album in surround sound, including an additional orchestral track called Tiptoe, and footage from the album recording sessions, which would have been really cool to see. The premiere of PTA's video for Friend of a Friend. There were screenings at various movie houses in the United Kingdom and in other locations. And this is what I wanted to get to. These independent screenings led to some people, a select group, but probably thousands at least, hearing the album earlier than the general public. So it was released, I think it got an international release of January 26th. But this indirectly, folks listening to the album or getting to hear it, I should say, earlier than others, indirectly led to my suspension from the Smiles Reddit board. It was only a 7-day suspension. And yeah, so this is funny, and I also want to bring it up much, much later. But the reason why I got suspended, no, it wasn't for using any racial slurs, don't worry, was because, not this time, no.
And Zach is there at times we have both been very active in Radiohead and Radiohead related
or the Smile Reddit
subreddits, but Zach has maintained that, I would say, much more than I have. And I often refer to what I consider to be our celebrity status on Reddit. We've had, we're involved in the discussions here. So this is like I would say a real blow to the the Smile Reddit community that
I'm back on. I've been on there, posting various drawings I've done. I don't ever, I should say, I don't think I've ever posted anything that's just text related of what do y'all think or can we talk about? I hate that kind of stuff, but I also don't shoot it down, but it's just not my thing. I like to share stuff about the bands that I've either created or this or that. But
but what happened?
I broke that rule. Okay, so like I say, them playing these accompanying films and then the whole album led to a handful of people hearing the album in its entirety before the general public did. And on the Smiles Reddit board, there were so this would have been January 18th to 19th. There was an abundance of braggy, condescending posts from people that had gotten to go to these viewing parties or listening parties from UK and a select group from the United States. It was only on the East Coast where they did any showings. And they were all written in this tone of, or the ones that I read, I should say, were all written in this self-congratulatory tone and such condescending of, y'all are going to love this album, blah, blah, blah. I myself, and that was like the consistent through line. Oh, and like they would totally inorganically mention how they met Tom and Johnny. And I commented on a couple of them. Did you get any pictures or anything? No, they don't do pictures. Oh, okay, got it. Which is true, they don't. And maybe they did. But
I'm sure phones were locked at these events.
I'm sure they were too. That part didn't feel like a lie. I don't think I actually posted that. I posted,
but I mean, yeah, Tom York and Johnny Greenwood famously love to glad hand with fans.
Yes. Actually, I should back up too. I posted a picture of Walker and I having seen the Smile live on our 1-year anniversary, and it got a gazillion upvotes on the Smile Reddit board, but everyone used it as an example to brag that they met Tom and Johnny after the show. And on like the 15th one, I was like, cool, do you have any pictures? Because they said they had signed memorabilia too, and silence. And but it was just bugging me so bad. So I went on the Smiles Reddit board and was like, I'm seeing a lot of condescending blah 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 about anyone who got to go to these shows. We get it, the album's good, and you got to hear it before us. And my friend, it was flying on the upvotes. I think it had been up for like 10 minutes.
You were like the voice of the voiceless here. Where it's
so,
just
yeah,
like,
I got a couple.
Not all of
LMA.
us are in your ivory towers of like getting to go to these UK listening parties, and the fucking like serfs down here waiting for the album to come out. We're like, this guy is speaking for us.
Thank you, dude. What you just said was on the lines of my post. I can't find my post because when it got deleted, it immediately deletes it, and you can't even see the old version of it.
Yeah, and they memory hold it. It's like we need to write an alternate.
But I know
here.
It was funny. I got a couple LMAOs. I got a couple this in all caps.
That part. Did anyone say that part?
No one said that.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
Yeah, us. So it was just, and I got this really condescending message from the moderators that were like, this is a place for enjoying the music, not a place. And they're right. I mean, there's you go on the True Detective Reddit board or anything that is experiencing some level of analysis right now, it just turns into the most degenerative, offensive, fucking whatever you want to. But so I get that, and they have to safeguard against that. But I loved that people were loving it, and then it immediately got taken down. But the way it corresponds to my overall feelings on the album is Walker and I saw the Smile live as they were conceivably writing this album. I think they did their first Instagram post in March of 2023. Sorry, that they were working on a new album. So going back almost a year ago, or that they were in the studio or something like that. Maybe it was actually in November or something like that. But it was a while ago. It was like, over a year ago. But we got to see them live on their end of their tour for Attracting Attention. And listeners, you can look up any of the songs they played that did not make this album. Or you can listen to our episode, The Smile Live, in which we play those tracks. Like Walker said, some of them made it onto this album and some didn't. And so when I talk about the choices they made, I should say, I'm not coming at it from a place of, I wish people could experience what I got to experience with the Smile. You can hear it too, listeners. Just go on and look up their set list from San Francisco, California, and listen to the songs that did not make this album. So all that being said, that figures the songs that they did not put onto it and what they did figure crucially into sort of my overall feelings on the album. I'm not going to post about it on the Smiles Reddit board like everyone, but
Well, I'd love to hear about what was left off that you feel is maybe if there's anything that you feel are omissions, because one song that is not on here was my least favorite song that they played during the concert.
Yes.
And one song that is on here is one of my least favorite songs that they played during the concert. And I don't really recall, and the ones that are on the album that we did not hear on that tour, I am aware of. But I'm not aware off the top of my head of many songs that they were playing on the tour that did not make it on. So I would love you to point those out and we can discuss those. Should we, do you think on that note, we should get into the album?
I do. Absolutely.
Now, one of the songs, this song opens with a title track. This one was released as a single before the album. So I heard it 3 or 4 months ago at this point, I believe. This is the title track, Wall of Eyes. It was not debuted on the tour. The first time I heard it was when we all heard it for the first time when they released it as a single. And I think it very much sets the table for a different feel than the last album. So this is that one right here.
Fuck all you hoes! Detroit till I die, motherfucker!
So it's interesting that they're shouting out Detroit because they're not from Detroit, but maybe they consider themselves kind of expats. Do you know?
What is this? Is this Machine Gun Kelly? Or Kid Rock?
It's Kid Rock. It is Kid Rock. This is his 2022 single, Don't Tell Me How to Live, where he takes a swing at woke culture. And, everybody gets a trophy culture, snowflakes in their pronouns. Let's listen to this for a sec. It's so bad.
Listen up, ain't nothing changed.
Listen up.
Don't give a fuck. So
Oh my God.
with all the backlash, you snowflakes, here's a news flash. Ain't nobody.
Zach is having a very physical reaction. Do you not remember when this came out? The video is him getting on a rocket ship shaped like a middle finger and
No.
Oh, that last part. That last part was so good. He says, back in my day, it was a joke, you see, that every kid got a motherfucking trophy.
Oh my God.
Every opinion has a millennial effect. Also, it's like, hey, dude, we're not making, millennials are old now. I'm a millennial. I'm 37 years old. You're not even mocking the right generation. We're going after Gen Z now.
I know. No shit.
Yeah, it's really. Oh, I kind of like this part.
He's doing his best Dio.
I was gonna say this part sounds kind of audio slavey to me. It's kind of.
Oh yeah, a little Ronnie James Dio and Audio Slave.
Oh, this bridge is cool.
Wait. I mean, this is nice.
Yeah, we love this part. The rest of the song's not great. This part's great.
Oh, bringing in the women. I like that.
Yeah.
Showing that he's inclusive.
Possibly women of color even. They sound like black backup singers, so,
Yeah. Okay, I get it.
Okay, so Zach, I want to tell you, first of all, that Zach was genuinely, I got to see him be genuinely shocked because he asked for a fake out song and I was like, I don't have time to do that this week. So I saw him put on his concentrating about to listen to the smile face and then get hit with, but Zach, I wanted to tell you too, this was my second pick because the one I almost used was also a right-wing anthem, but I was
from a small town?
No. Don't try that in a small town. No, it was
that song.
It's called Boycott Target. And it was a rap song. There's these MAGA rappers that did this song. Did you hear that? It came out 6 months ago.
No.
And it was it's the chorus is target, target, targeting our kids, target, yeah, they target kids. And it's basically like because Target is like selling shirts with like rainbows on it.
Yeah, I remember that controversy.
Yeah, that dumbass controversy. And I was like, and the song, first of all, is like kind of a banger. Like it gets really stuck in my head. And like when the weekend came out, I was singing it nonstop around the house.
Oh, great.
And it is great. And I was like, recording that one into our soundboard to do, and then it went into the verses, and I'm like, oh, this is way too explicitly hateful to do even as a joke, and has a bunch of stuff I'm not comfortable with platforming on our podcast. So Kid Rock was the one where it's just, you know, just general woke and snowflake culture is the target of his ire, and so I thought we'd actually have some fun with that one.
Yeah, well, hey, I can smell a pig from a mile away, so I had an idea, but, you know.
Yeah, man, he's got a good racket going, doesn't he?
Yeah.
All right, so that was a bit of fun. This is the title track from Wall of Eyes. This is Wall of Eyes. I think a nylon string guitar.
Yeah, because it could almost be an ukulele, if you will. Even though I know it's not. There's too many strings being strummed, but it's definitely got to be a nylon. Do you hear the uke? Like, I think you could play this song on the uke. You'd have to transpose it because I think it's in the key of E flat, but you could play it.
I mean, just right off the bat, this rhythm and style of guitar play is very atypical of Thom Yorke. This kind of upstroke, slightly flamenco, slightly reggae, I would say, like tinged style of rhythmic play is, I would say, very unusual for him.
I mean, I think how it's delivered might be unusual. I definitely hear the reggae. I was really listening to it, trying. One thing that's interesting about this album, Walker, that I can't wait for us to discover together, you to kind of educate me along the way, is what does this song sound like? Not every song, but then here we're going into something different, right? But
bass line that comes in is so cool.
Well, I'll hurry up. But you mentioned the rhythm, and that's something I want to talk about after the song. It is in 5/4. And we'll get into greater depth of that just for a little refresher for fun after the song ends. But I agree, though, the nylon is atypical. But
it's one of two songs in 5/4 on this album that, man, what he is so good at is doing non-traditional. Oh, I love that whistling there, too. Mm-hmm. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Non-traditional time signatures, and they are presented so fluidly that I did not pick up that this song is in 5/4 until I read it. And then I started counting along with it, and I went, yep, it sure is. And that is the same with the other song that I know is in 5/4. There might be more than one, but the other one that I am aware is in 5/4 on this album. It's really singable, and I find myself tapping my foot along to it similarly as I find myself easily tapping my foot along to 15 Step or Everything in Its Right Place. Whenever I have experimented with Morning Bell, another great example. Whenever I, in my songwriting or just messing around, have experimented with non-3/4 or 4/4 time signatures, it tends to just kind of sound like I threw an extra beat on something inorganically to try to make it more interesting. And I don't really ever get that from Tom's songs. It sounds like he's just very comfortable in that time.
Yeah, he's very comfortable in an odd meter, which is something that just is what you need to be. I want to talk about that a little further, maybe once the music isn't going. But what do you think about these strings added right here to kind of give the song a little bit of vibrance or a little bit of a more ominous feel is sort of how I would describe it. What do you think?
I think it's awesome. I love this song, and I think it's a great table setter for what is going to be a little more of a quiet album than the last one. Not that it doesn't have there's rock and roll on this album, but it builds to it, and I think this song is gorgeous. gorgeous, 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 and a departure from their past work, as I said. But I also feel that it could kind of maybe be at home on a moon-shaped pool.
Oh,
melodically, giving me that kind of like mix of major and minor that they have. This right here. I just want this kind of ersatz guitar solo to play for a second.
Very Kid A. The title track from Kid A reminds me of a little bit, interwoven to something wholly new. Just these noises.
What do you think of this song, Zach? I mean, I'm going to use the word love. I love this song. This is a favorite on the album for me.
Well, if I could just do a little visual metaphor, it's so funny. You remember 10, 12 years back when that version of Somewhere Over the Rainbow on ukulele came out and it was everywhere all the time? To me at first, even though I know it's a nylon, I was kind of like, oh, this reminds me just of something bright like Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I'm just talking for the first 30, 40 seconds. What I love about it is as the orchestra kind of clashes with it, if you're thinking about the brightness of something as beautiful as Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I almost picture like a thunderstorm coming and colliding with the two. And then when that, and this is just for me personally, I don't know if this is whatever, and then when that solo comes in, all those disparate noises, it's sort of like the two are parted. It's almost like oil and water in the way that they don't mix, but in the most beautiful way. Did that visual analogy make any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of times I think with Tom York and Johnny Greenwood music, visuals are a component, and they're going to be different within each person. But just because Tom is a visual artist, so I just think it's so cool that, at least just for me, that it could stir some other type of imaginative, analogy or story or whatever. But it's a grower for me. I know you said you love it. I never didn't like it, but it's very much become a grower for me as I've listened to the album over the last month.
I think for me, it's like one of my favorite songs Tom has written in a few years. Like it's like up there, like kind of like it's like up there with, Dawn Chorus as like a modern era favorite, which is honestly how I'm starting to look at like how I'm consuming the Smile and Radiohead and solo work at this point is just like, what is the project that is currently how I'm getting Tom York songs and how do I feel about it? That is the single largest ingredient of like, what is the thing that I am the most attached to out of all these projects? And it is like, I love Tom York's songwriting. I love his singing. And then, he dresses it up in different ways in these different projects. And when it's with Johnny, it's, I like it a little more than when it's not or whatever. But this is a favorite Tom York song of mine.
I love that.
In a long time. And I don't want us to, stop and drill down on every
We're setting
song
the tape, though, here, listeners.
Yeah, I do want to, while we have it stopped, I want to talk about the lyrics of this song a little bit because, title tracks are generally title tracks for a reason. And the theme of this album, as I see it, is certainly not new for Tom York, but I think it's something that he's discussed in all his music, maybe since The Bend, certainly since OK Computer, and very consistently since Kid A on. But this does seem to share a lot of lyrical DNA with me to Anima as kind of being an album that is very concerned with kind of the contradictory feelings of living in an organic world, but a very digitized, inorganic, online, avatar obsessed time, where we're all kind of living through our digital doppelgangers, so to speak. And I think that to that effect, Wall of Eyes can mean many different things to many different people, but I do think he literally is talking about the phone. The opening lyrics.
I do too,
here.
Walker. Oh,
yeah. Would you like to jump in?
No, please take it away.
I mean, just the opening lyrics, I think, really clue you in. It's down a peg or two you'll go behind a wall of eyes of your own device. Is that still you with the hollow eyes? Change to black and white. Strap yourself in. The trains don't go there. The trains don't go there. Now, that refrain is repeated as a chorus. I'm not sure what the trains don't go there means, but I think it could literally be like a up there within Idiotech, mobiles squirking, mobiles chirping, just kind of like a refrain of like a thing that you say when you're looking at your phone. Wait, what time does the fucking train? How do we, like, it's just like him throwing in a little bit of like chatter that we have related to our devices. But yeah, so I do think the wall of eyes is referring to the phone in front of our face and being able to see that more easily than you can see a person's eyes.
My interpretation of it was, I don't know that it's any different than what maybe you can clarify for me, but I was picturing it if part one is a light for attracting attention, just name wise, right? Maybe there's a little bit of a cheeky joke in there, or, making fun of themselves in a way, as much as, the Smile or Tom York can. But I think Tom has a good sense of self about his fame and all that. I really do. If that is the name of the debut album, Wall of Eyes, I think is kind of not a backlash to that, but you could even say a light for attracting attention is like our phone. What do you do when you have your Lyft driver and it's dark? Politely, you might hail them with your phone or something like that. You might, maybe it's speaking to putting yourself on some sort of social media platform, scantily clad, or saying something, controversial or whatever, just to get some attention. With this, I was picturing it as Tom explaining or the way I interpret it, who knows how he meant it, as Tom feeling a wall of eyes on him from people staring at their phones. So I think it might be similar to what you're saying, but like he just feels like there's a wall of eyes on him at all time because he's a famous individual, things like that. I mean, I think this is like,
I think it's both. I think it's looking into the spectacle and the spectacle looking back. And I think that this album closes on a song that is about being seen in that way and not seen while being looked at as a form of spectacle. Anima was about the dream world, right? And the dream world is the fake online phone world that we all inhabit. And like I said, I think and those themes were not new to his songwriting on Anima, and they're not new now, but I do think it is a further exploration of just like a fear of modernity, a fear of what modernity looks like now. I mean, I think that those of us who find ourselves preoccupied with concerns about the state of the world now, that's really heightened after the pandemic and the Smile or I think if they're tied to one singular thing in history so far in their existence, it would be the global pandemic, the global COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm not surprised that this is what he's on about. And even just the image of a wall of eyes. I mean, Tom has lyrical imagery that he does return to again and again. It calls to mind for me the lyric in Man of War, when you come home, I'll bake you a cake made of all their eyes. I think that also this is just an image that he happens to like a lot.
Well, not only that too. The download for the 2009 Radiohead song, These Are My Twisted Words, a song that they've not ever released album-wise to my knowledge, but was a live staple up through the King of Limbs touring, contained a text file that had the phrase wall of ice, that's I as in Indigo, C as in Charlie, E as in Edward, triggering speculation that it was the title of an upcoming Radiohead EP. Obviously it was not. The phrase wall of eyes later appeared in the promotional materials for Radiohead's 2011 King of Limbs as well. It's difficult to find, but it's in there. So this is obviously, I think, just speaks to the greater point that Walker just made, that these themes and ideas are ones that Tom has harkened upon again and again. And I love that, in a previous guest opinion, Jesse Rimler said, I don't get the feeling that Tom is sitting on a mountain of poetry. I agree with that. And I think that's what we kind of collectively agreed is one of his strengths, that even though sometimes songs can be lyrically pretty thin, this is one of the denser songs, I would say, in terms of the amount of lyrics, but it's continuing to explore those same feelings of discomfort. And those are my feelings on this song. I like it. It's a grower. It's not a natural opener to me. Well, we'll talk more about arrangement maybe as we go on. I'd like to move on though, unless you have anything else to add. Please.
Well, even though we've broken the flow by stopping and talking a little bit, listeners, try to even maybe go back and listen to a few bars of Wall of Eyes and then think about it flowing into track 2, Teleharmonic, because I think that, isolated, it's a little strange and a little bit of an outlier, but I do think I gotta say, I think this album is very well sequenced and has a real flow to it, and I think that it's a build, it crests, and then it kind of comes back down.
Sure.
So this is track 2, Teleharmonic, and from here on out, I'm probably gonna play one song after the other.
So, listeners, we're gonna let this one breathe a little bit. Excuse me. Just kind of engage with these noises. Sounds like guitar run through an effects pedal to kind of give us that sound. Sounds like multiple guitars to me. And we'll hear this as the song goes on. From an effects perspective, it very much reminds me of the 2-piece instrumental band Rat-a-Tat and what they would do on guitars in a much lower kind of frequency. So we're going to let it breathe, and I hear him just talking. But if you kind of hear that wow, listeners, that is something that Rat-a-Tat will do to kind of harmonize guitars and give them sort of an elongated pulse. Radiohead do this kind of thing too, but we got Tom Skinner coming in to establish a rhythm. Walker, what do you think of what they're doing, sort of effects-wise, musically, to open this song and set a mood? With the
I think this one is, for me, categorized similarly to how you felt about Wall of Eyes. I liked it from the first time I heard it, but it's so kind of such a low and slow simmer. It took me a little while to kind of pull out the melody. I really, really like this song. I think it's gorgeous. And the title track kind of set me up to say what I think this album lyrically has the most in common with. For me, it is Anima. I do thematically see this album as kind of an extension of Tom York's last solo album. Sonically, this song...
Wait.
Yeah, please.
Just want to hear this part.
Oh, when the bass kicks in.
And there's a guitar breakdown coming up that is so special to me. Please continue. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think it's great that you stop to make sure people hear that part. The bass and drums of this song give it its entire groove. And on top of it, it's very, very ethereal sounds. And so I love that it comes in with this kind of busy bass line here.
Mm-hmm. We also have a wind instrument. Talking of the title, this part is beautiful vocally, but the title, Teleharmonic, you could interpret many, many ways. But to me, I was waxing poetic while you got up for just a second there, Walker, about the breathing. Maybe you can help me out with my terminology of the guitar. The wow.
Volume swells.
Volume swells. Thank you very much. Teleharmonic, it's a harmony of guitars making that. And Johnny Greenwood has historically played a Telecaster for many years. You could also, I think maybe in its most literal sense, you could interpret it that way. I compared it to Rat-a-Tat, but a much lower... It musically is reminiscent of them minus the vocals in the best possible way.
Yeah, it's also I think more allusions to like the phone world.
Of course.
And also in its like most base form, Tom York loves to put two words together to make a new word.
Right here.
And yeah.
Very Rat-a-Tat. And it's not Rat-a-Tat. It's not about meaning to listen, but listeners, it's incredible.
And then, yeah, you hear those little orchestral, like you were saying, like woodwind sounds.
Yeah.
Well, Zach, this is... So I don't know... I'm speculating with what I'm about to say. I think this album, sonically, and in no greater sorry. I think this album sonically, and it's illustrated by this song better than any other, shares the most in common with... Would you like to guess what album I think this... Well, I will give you a hint from the Radiohead. It is a Radiohead studio album, but which album I think this has the most in common with out of every Radiohead or solo project?
Me think. Every Radiohead? It's a
Radiohead album, but including, the Tom York solo work and stuff. I think it has a kind of, a paternal twin.
Pool.
No?
King of Limbs.
This album's very King of Limbs to me. To me, this album is a more successful execution of the kind of sound and approach on King of Limbs. Now, I do not know if this was recorded in the same way, but to me, a lot of the instrumentation has that sound of them sampling live instruments and then chopping and screwing it up. The sounds, the guitar sounds that we just heard in Teleharmonic. Now, Johnny Greenwood is a master of manipulating guitars into sounding all sorts of ways. So he totally could be sitting there playing the guitar live, but it sounds to me like a synthesized guitar track, maybe like recut up. Same with that kind of very strange guitar solo that ends the last section of the title track, Wall of Eyes. To me, sounds like they took guitar sounds and sampled them up and digitally chopped and screwed it up.
Sure.
And I also just think that like the slightness of this album has a lot in common with King of Limbs, where it's not unambitious, but it's constrained and kind of intentionally and knowingly constrained. On King of Limbs, it was because they wanted to do this other approach where they were not playing live instruments, or they were writing the songs on live instruments and then doing them in a synthesized form on the album. In this, it has to do with the fact that they're remaining very true to the fact that this is a 3-piece band and trying to stick to arrangements that they can duplicate live. But it just sounds like that album to me. It reminds me, some of these songs, the way they sound, remind me of the From the Basement sessions of King of Limbs, where I think both of us prefer a lot of those arrangements. And certainly a lot of Radiohead fans are like, oh, the better version of King of Limbs is them playing it live in the studio. I don't feel that way,
but I do think it's great footage. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, and I think I like King of Limbs, and it really grew on me. But there are songs that I don't like that much on the album that when you see them play them live, you're like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. This sounds like those sessions to me on a lot of the songs. Now, one that does not bear a ton in common with King of Limbs to me is the following song.
But before we play that, I would just say that last song reminds me a lot of All I Need Meets Codex, two of my favorite slower songs.
Yep, I get
from
that.
In Rainbows and King of Limbs. But yeah, let's hit me with this next song.
This is Read the Room. Now, this is the first song that we're hearing on the album that we saw them working out live, right?
Yeah.
They did not play Teleharmonic on that last tour, did they?
This song is called Read the Room.
This was, at the concert, my favorite of the unreleased at that time songs. It's heavy. It sounded really heavy live. And to me, it sounds more or less unchanged from its arrangement that it had.
This one was
really
really worked. This was we said on the Smile Live episode, this one sounds the most worked out.
We'll let the vocals breathe for a moment here. The fuzz bass is so cool. Tom is playing the bass in this song, and the bass line is matching the vocal melody, which I think is really cool. Kind of a Brian Wilson, Paul McCartney approach there.
Walker, the bass playing on this song and on Teleharmonic, we didn't skip over it on Teleharmonic, but goddamn is the bass playing on this song so superb. And listeners, if you can spring for it, you don't even have to, but the more you can spend, the better on a pair of over-the-ear headphones. You just hear the different guitar parts. It is a guitar harmony. It's just so amazing. we talked about I'm sorry if you were about to speak, but we talked about Pink Floyd in terms of just prog rock. I think this song is a very, very, very Pink Floyd in the Animals era a little bit. And then what do we go into?
Yeah, this is almost kind of like chamber music. It's very pretty, but it sounds really unsettlingly so up against how kind of like snotty and punky that last section.
Well, yeah. And going into your analysis of the lyrics, I love this so much. Who knows what it wants from me? This goes where it wants to be. Honey for the honeybee. What is a honeybee? They're a drone. And what do they need? They need to bring honey back to the nest to pollinate. So it just kind of goes back to that robotic thing. The title's called Read the Room. Honestly, maybe you should read the room and fuck off sometimes is what I feel like saying to people, you know? So I think it's really still riding that line, a lot of what you've spoken about.
Tom Skinner getting to really go nuts here. Listen to these fills.
I mean,
he's getting to, I think this is the first song where Tom Skinner has been playing really, really tight on the first two songs. He's like holding them together. And on this one, he's getting to kind of go out and be the jazz man a little bit. And I really enjoy
listeners, I agree. We're going into the second time we've heard this little chorus break. And then we're going to go into a new section called Section B. We're going to let that play for just a minute. So to me, this sounds, I said in our episode, The Smile Live, I'm going to say it now, this sounds like The Cars, this sounds like The Police. So really kind of keep that in mind, right? We got that bass cooking again, and it sounds like those two bands, doesn't it? Until one key moment. There. And
Does it go down a half step there?
It goes down a half step, and it goes to a half step minor. Then it becomes a Tom York, Johnny Greenwood, Tom Skinner collab. I don't know if now's the best time to release my HTATS. No, not a hot take about the smile. Hot take about this song. This song is arranged, but I do have an HTATS about the smile. But about this song matches and inverts the arrangement of my second favorite Radiohead song of all time, They're There. It has, it's two parts overall, but we have a verse, chorus, essentially, except for the coda of They're There is much darker. Not to say that this isn't without darkness, but it's kind of inverted a little bit, and I love that. And I love when Radiohead writes songs in, you know, two parts, essentially. Dex Start comes to mind. Let's just, like... Oh, this singing and this guitar work, Walker.
It's also, again, it sounds like three of the best musicians you've ever heard playing a guitar song in their garage.
And I love that it goes back to everybody thinks so. This is so The Cars, Walker. This is so...
It reminds me of Television a little bit.
Talking about timing again, this is an 11/8, essentially.
Oh, cool. I just think Johnny's tone on what I think is probably the Les Paul there, that like dirty rhythm tone, is so nice. Like it's really, I know with these guys it's never simple, but it sounds so simple and it sounds so direct. And again, that last song to me is one that it's weird enough to be a Radiohead song, but it's kind of too direct to be a Radiohead song. I don't think they would put that. It would sound really out of place on their last few albums to me. And who knows? Maybe Radiohead would have gone back in this direction of more guitars and more rock and roll or whatever. But, you know, doesn't really seem like it. It seems like they kind of were consciously continuing to push away from that for, you know, certainly for King of Limbs. And I think to a large extent on A Moon-Shaped Pool as well. And so I don't like this more than what they did for the last, 7-8 years of Radiohead releasing music, but it's great to hear it again. I think it's really cool, and I think we kind of stay in this prog rock, guitar rock section for the next song too.
Yeah, but just before we go, I already gave my HTATS, which was my hot take about that song. my HTATS, Hot Take About the Smile, and I don't mind saying it now, that is my favorite song The Smile have ever made up to this point.
Okay. I mean, I love it. I don't know.
Cannot
if it's
stop
me,
listening to that song.
Okay, I like that. That's a good hot take. That's a very positive hot take. I really like it. I think Read the Room is awesome. For me, it's definitely it's the peak of heaviness on this album for me. And by heaviness, I mean sound. Like, it's a very heavy sounding song. Live, I think it was definitely my favorite song live that was not from A Light for Attracting Attention.
And, and you said it sounded the most worked out too at the time.
It was the most worked out, and it was the one that I walked away humming. I heard it for the first time, and I had the melody kind of in my head. This is also a song we heard them play on the tour that made it onto this album. This is, again, in this kind of vein, we'll recognize a now becoming familiar technique that Johnny is doing on his guitar here. This is Under Our Pillows. This song is about the last time I lost a baby tooth, and I put it under my pillow.
This song is about my Glock. Just kidding, listeners. I'm not a gun owner. So invade away.
So we're getting that very
kind of like
percussive
thin thing
hammer
or the same.
on. Exactly. Thin thing. This is a way that Johnny likes to use his tools.
A new way. Very cool. Now, Walker,
and
you
the
said
bass
when we
playing in this is very much presenting counter melodies to what Johnny is doing. Everybody in this is very in the pocket, but I feel like each of the three elements are emphasizing different parts of the rhythm of this song.
Yeah, everyone's in the pocket musically, in terms of bass, guitar, and drums, and anything else that might be present. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it now. I do not like this vocal take at all. And I feel like this is one of the few songs that this and Read the Room are in the vein of the songs I like the most. I'm not saying the album shouldn't have variety and they should all be like Thin Thing or the same. Or not the same, I'm sorry. The opposite. I meant the opposite and Thin Thing. The technique. I don't want an album of just this. I feel like I know what they're going for in this song as much as you can. But it feels like I know the vibe they set out. Tom York's voice is in amazing shape. It sounds exactly the same as when we listen to it on the Smile Live, in which we both agreed he sounds pitchy and bored, and like he hasn't found it. And I don't think he's bored, but Tom's voice is in great shape, as we know from this album and seeing them live. I really don't like the vocal melody he chose over it, especially in the upcoming breakdown, because I'll complain more once that comes. What do you think?
I'm stunned.
Okay, because I really like the song and I love this proggy atmosphere that they're going for, and I'll tie it back into what they... So right here.
I'm stunned because I hate this song. And I didn't know that. I hate this song.
You do?
Yeah. I was...
See,
and I just basically feel meh about everything we just heard, and this section that we are entering right now, to me, is some of the least inspired music I have heard from Tom York and company in several years. I think what we're hearing right now sucks.
Tom gets the blame for it, Walker, because the musicianship is cool. One thing Tom is so great at, why I feel like he's lazy, is Tom pick almost any song from their catalog where he picks his spots. This is like such an amateur thing to do, to have a little melody and sing the exact melody perfectly in it. He's a master of obfuscating the melody.
I think musically what's happening here is really boring and uninspired too. I don't like this section musically either. I agree with you, the vocal is not very interesting on this song, but I feel like this one and Colors Fly were the two moments live where I was like, this is reminding me why I don't like prog rock. It feels like more like it's about like, it's, I don't know. It sounds nerdy
you don't
to me,
not
and not
like
in
prog
a.
rock. Some of it appeals more to you than others, wouldn't you
This
say?
is what I think of when I
okay.
think about why I don't like prog rock. Is it sounds
Okay.
like nerd music that doesn't have a melody. And what I love about Radiohead is they're able to make nerd music that does have a melody, and I'm tapping my foot to and singing along to. This just sounds like really self-serious and uninteresting. I don't like this song at all.
And just so wait, real quick to clarify, you were surprised that I didn't like it because you also don't like it?
Yes.
Did you think I would really like this or something?
I just thought maybe you would latch
No.
on to something that they were doing musically that, wasn't doing it for me, but you like maybe understood on a more technical level, and that would move you.
I'm so grateful that you have pulled out a surprise. But yeah, and now you said about a certain part, this is, or about more just the crafting of the song is what you don't like. This, what's happening right now is what sometimes I don't like in prog rock when it's done poorly. So listeners know I've mentioned them many, many times. The Mars Volta, those first 2 albums at least, and a couple after. Their debut album, I think, is a masterpiece. I'm not saying, whatever. But I really do feel that way. It's a masterpiece
and I agree.
in cohesion. Now, Mars Volta have long ambient sections like this. What they do so smartly is they'll sandwich them in after the second verse or whatever that'll then build into a giant guitar solo. This sucks because this is like feral to me or something. I realize there's a lot going on, but this just goes on and is not interesting. And all it does is just go into our next song. And this reminds me of feral or other stuff off maybe Tomorrow's Modern Boxes or something, even though I could hear Tom Skinner on his Riders Crash or whatever doing stuff. I'm not saying nothing's happening, but we don't need this because what the Mars Volta reward you so much with on those is then it'll build into a bombastic, awesome guitar solo that you never saw coming. That'll then build into like their last verse or whatever. Simplistically put, this is just prog bullshit. This is Pink Floyd in 1973, but when they were doing it, it was very new. And I don't always like that, but like, come on, guys. This is a waste of space on your 8-track album. I was getting heated.
I know. I liked how it cut. I liked how it cut out while you were saying that. I mean, yeah, I don't have a new way to articulate that I don't like that song other than I have. I agree with what you're saying. I don't mind a little white noise to close out a track. I just
but make it meaningful.
To me that song is really wanky in a way that I don't appreciate. Now
I'm mad that they put it on.
It stands in harsh juxtaposition to how I feel about this next song. I think we are continuing to be in kind of the more overtly kind of rock and roll section of the album here. This is another one that we heard them play on tour, though it had a different name at the time. This is Friend of a Friend.
And what was it called when we saw them on tour, Walker?
When he referred to it by
Loose
a
change
couple different things
for people on balconies.
Yeah, I think when we saw it was called Loose Change, and other times it was called Window Balconies. And I think both of those things are referenced in the lyrics. I think he landed on the best title, Friend of a Friend.
Mm-hmm.
Zach, this is the other one that is in 5/4 that to me sounds just so natural and fluid that I did not register that until it was pointed out to me, or I read it. Maybe it was pointed out by you. Maybe I read it, but then I, counted along, and by golly, it sure is. This song to me is like straight up Kinks like Britpop. There's the review I read in the Pitchfork review I read said it's the most Beatles-y thing that they've ever done. And yeah, I suppose so. Like I said, it doesn't specifically remind me of the Beatles so much.
Until right now, when it becomes a Randy Newman song, which on our episode of The Smile Live, I said this sounds like Randy Newman or Harry Nilsson. And this that is what the Pitchfork article says too. So Idiot Talk 1, Pitchfork 0.
There you go. And we're getting some. No, please go ahead.
Well, I just really like
this swing too, this bounce. It's very playful in a way that, again, I don't think Radiohead would be. But the Smile is feeling okay playing in this sandbox, and I really like that.
Well, the thing that I love so much about it is, and I was joking, by the way, listeners, multiple people can have observations and no one can trademark that. I just do feel cool because Randy Newman, people know him primarily as somebody who did a lot of the Pixar films brilliantly, also has a huge catalog of work just as an artist, as is his brother. But when it reaches that Randy Newman part specifically, that reminds me, I'm like, oh, this melody and the way he's building sounds like it could have been from Toy Story or something like that. Then it goes right into Smile.
From the waist down.
Yes. Then it goes into the Smile territory, though, with the convergence of weird orchestral stuff, which I just really appreciate. So, yeah, it shows that they're not afraid to show what kind of stuff they're listening to, whereas with Radiohead, they have songs like this in the Amnesiac era and all their albums, of course, in a way. But I don't know that this would be on a Radiohead album. Here's that Randy Newman part again, I think. Yeah.
And we should say also some of the great brass playing happening on this song is Richard Stillman, who plays on the last album and opened the show. He does solo performing where he does all these loops with his sax, and it's really cool. And he came out and played with them on this song and a few others.
Yeah.
And also, I'm assuming that these orchestral arrangements are courtesy of Johnny, and it's gorgeous. The string arrangements, I love,
bass, dude.
Love this song. Zach, the other thing I love is, you know what I think? This song, unlike I think everything else from the Smile so far, Tom's a great bass player, but to me it's the fact that he's playing bass more in this band seems a little bit more like function than intention to me. This song sounds like he wrote it on the bass.
And he did play the bass live when we saw it too. So
oh yeah, and I would say he's playing the bass on about 60% of the songs. So it's not a knock on his bass playing on the other stuff. It's just I think that he probably primarily writes on the piano and then secondarily probably on the guitar. And this song to me sounds like he picked up the bass, made up this bass line, and started singing a melody over it. And it just sounds like it was built from the bass up. Who knows? But that's how it sounds to me, and I think it gives it a warmth that the other stuff hasn't had.
That big orchestral swell we just had kind of while you were talking about that, in this Pitchfork article, again, they liken it to A Day in the Life, which we did the exact same thing when we talked about our episode Seeing the Smile Live. So I think there's definitely just, folks are maybe picking up on similar things influence-wise, and that's a cool thing because I think you've just said it on this episode and in previous ones that the Smile maybe they are free of some of that self-imposed constraint, what have you, that Radiohead might put on themselves to, hey, this might sound a little too much like this. I think while that song is reminiscent of certain pieces atmospherically that we've heard on Amnesiac and on A Moon-Shaped Pool specifically, it doesn't sound like it would belong on a Radiohead record. And I know this is going to sound like, is it heresy or whatever, but that one took a long time to grow on me. I was like, okay. I know this is a great song. I know it's not something that I could ever write, even just, simplistically, but the bass playing is so superb. It doesn't seem as functional as like it has previously. I think Tom has really grown as a bass player in this song and in the previous two, honestly, Teleharmonic and on Read the Room in particular. And so that's really brings me a lot of joy. And it's not samey as other ballady stuff. I know you want to kind of go to the next song, but I want to let you know that my enthusiasm has really grown for it, and I know it's very high for you too. So your love for it made me want to work at it too, and it felt a very organic thing to kind of fall in love with.
Oh man, that's so great to hear, and yeah, I just love it because it's not that I even want Tom York to go in this more like playful sounding direction at the cost of what he's more interested in. It's just so unusual for him to do a song that sounds like this. So I just really like it. And again, it makes me so excited about this band because it's like, as much as I just shit on Under Our Pillows or whatever, it's like, what? Honestly, if you get that to get this and the album is 95% stuff I really dig, keep plugging away and do whatever you want, because it's really, really fun that this band seems to be a landing pad for kind of all their ideas. Is really, really fun. And they happen to have a really high taste level and be world-class musicians. So it's like, hey, surprise, surprise, most of their ideas are good. I also, before we move on from this song, I just wanted to say I interpret it lyrically as a critique of kind of austerity budgeting that takes place under any sort of disaster, but kind of most recently has taken place because of the pandemic. And I think it's, all of that money, where did it go? Where did it go? I think this is pretty directly interpretable as a, criticism of like, this was a chance to really put governments and infrastructure to work for the people that have paid into it when they actually needed it. But like so many things, it became an opportunity for corporations and private interests to consolidate their, ability to make money off of disasters, what Naomi Klein has dubbed disaster capitalism.
Beat me to it.
Yeah, and shock doctrine, right? Using a shock on the economy or world to, again, just privatize the hell out of everything. I think that this is underscored by the video also, which on the one hand is very simple, but if it's the Smile performing in a school, in like a school auditorium for a bunch of elementary school age children. It's adorable. It's adorable to see the boys look like they're having a little bit of fun. And it shows them playing on a small stage as a three-piece and cuts between that to just reactions of different, I would say, like 8-year-old kids in this auditorium. The video made me really, really happy, but I also think it is a kind of Tom York is never going to be the kind of, or at least I hope not, be the kind of songwriter who doesn't disguise what he's saying in a few layers of poetry or irony. But I do think it's like underscoring the critique being made in the song and kind of the Smile version of saying the children are the future. And like, maybe we should be doing something for these humans instead of the fat cats. I think it underscores it very nicely.
I love that. And if I could just quickly just say some of what you were speaking to and just read this quote from Stereo Gum. Stereo Gum likened the piano song Friend of a Friend to the work of Randy Newman. And then I put in parentheses very pompously, said Zach on the Smile Live episode, or Ben Folds and likened the strings to 1967, the Beatles song A Day in the Life, what George Martin calls a musical orgasm when he's building up to the woke up, get out of bed. And then just real quick on the sound. Yeah. A sort of orgasm of sound. I never doubted that they'd be terrific musicians. But Pitchfork.
Some people say I misattributed. Isn't mine.
I misattributed the Stereo Gum quote to Pitchfork, but then Pitchfork said, draws inspiration from lockdown footage of Italians uniting in song on their balconies. The coda juxtaposes that pandemic solidarity against the least response. So I won't go on and on. Walker, I think you really obviously got a kind of a similar messaging from it. And, the reason why I just wanted to add that on is just because, or we've joked about, as much as you can joke about the pandemic, but the early response, and a lot of folks have, in America, we were like, why can't we be like more like Italy? Look at their all blah, blah, blah. Well, how long did that last? Or things like that. So I just wanted to add on to what you already said quite well, but I think it just shows the parallel thinking. I'm totally kidding about, point idiot talk, whatever. People can have the same opinion when they're that obvious, but that was all I wanted to add on. And that song has really grown on me. And I'm not just being silly here, man. Your passion for it really made me want to go like, what am I missing here? Is it just because of the fast pace of this or that? And I've really fallen in love with it a lot.
Oh, that's very heartwarming to hear. This next one is another song that, I heard for the first time when this album came out. I do not believe that this was being taken out on the last tour. This one is called I Quit. And Zach, no, I did not just put on a B-side from The King of Limbs. This is a new song on Wall of Eyes by the Smile. I mean,
I was about
to me,
I was about to quit if you did. So
to me,
that was such a stupid joke. I love that you gave it a courtesy laugh.
Well, you're getting a very genuine one now. Zach made the craziest face when he did that big fake laugh. I think that this sounds to me like, I'm really willing to stick my neck out and say this is an acoustic guitar being sampled. I would say probably played percussively by Johnny Greenwood, and then sampled and chopped and screwed, and I think it's super cool. I think this song has a really subtle groove to it, and I think it sounds like Radiohead. I know it's not that unusual for this band that has two of the members of Radiohead to sound like Radiohead, but this one to me is like one that I could very easily see being on one of their last couple albums. What do you think of I Quit?
Well, I have thoughts on it, but before I go into mine real quick, I'd like to just read the Pitchfork article review of this album, if you will, that we've quoted several times. It's just such a great article. As much as we've given Pitchfork a little bit of shit with their Popasis, I really, really enjoyed their analysis of this album.
Yeah, they're good at music journalism.
They very much are, yeah. Regarding the song I Quit, writer says Jazz, what was her?
Jasmine Rowe.
I'm not sure. Jasmine Rose, yeah, says the second side's Tour de Luxe, Tour de Loop, whatever the pronunciation is. The second side song falters only on I Quit, one of those Smile songs that perhaps suffers from Greenwood's desire to release records 90% as good that come out twice as often. And then we're jumping ahead, but it's relevant, where the arresting closer You Know Me, a song we haven't heard yet, evolves York's Paranoid Balladry. So they're talking about those two songs as if they kind of match each other. I Quit is the discount codex, so Walker said King of Limbs, or Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Rich Man, Poor Man, Beggar Man, Thief. I can't remember the full title, they don't say. That's from a Moon-Shaped Pool. So they're talking about I Quit. They say, intoxicating as ever, but without the final revelation, the sense of dawn penetrating some murky underworld that tilts those Radiohead songs into the sublime. I think that is an excellent encapsulation of the song. I'm not of the opinion, though, that this is where the album falters. I really, 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 really like this song as an atmospheric jam. I agree with you that I think it sounds like an acoustic song run through some effects to give it that delay, or acoustic guitar, I'm sorry, which I think is fine. It's not running everything through some sort of synthesis, but it's cool. It's inventive. I love these flourishes.
Well, I think these string breakdowns and key changes are super cool too. To me, I thought that was well written, but it just speaks to the subjective nature of taste.
Totally.
Because for me, this is not a weak song. It sounds lived in and finished and labored over to me in the best possible way. And it reminds me very specifically of Codex. It reminds me of, to me, what are the most inspired songs on King of Limbs, like Codex and what's the
Give
closer
Up the Ghost a little bit too.
Give Up the Ghost, and what's the closer that I love it.
Oh,
so
the
much.
closer of King of Limbs?
Yeah.
Separator.
Yeah, it reminds me of those kind of grooves where it's a really nice mix of the approach of organic live playing and them being masters of studio trickery.
Yeah.
And
this one reminds me a lot more
really
of Moon-Shaped Pool than it does, even though I totally hear the comparisons you're making.
The strings, the string melodies sound very Moon-Shaped Pool.
Yeah, so this one just didn't need time to grow on me. It's not my favorite or anything, but I loved that Pitchfork article. There's other quotes from it too from other publications, but I thought that one was, as you said, it speaks to the subjective nature, because I was like, really well written. I love that they took the time to kind of unpack it, but I really enjoy this one as a slower piece. So it's really, really nice.
I mean, I think that it's like, this is just a different album than the other one. I mean, by this point in the first album, we're getting stuff like, what am I trying to like Thin Thing and
Hair Dryer,
the opposite. waving the white flag and we don't know what tomorrow brings. Like,
what? But this reminds me of Waving the White Flag, though, a little bit. How you said when we were listening to that, did we just dip into Clockwork Orange, Stanley Kubrick? That's the boop boop that one.
Yeah.
This one kind of reminded me of that, but more palatable. Please go ahead. I totally interrupted.
No. I just think I just think the last album is a little more in your face, and this one's a little more. This one's a little quiet, but to me, it's very confident. And I'd be totally cool with them for their third record being like, this one has more big rock songs on it, especially if they sound more like Read the Room than Under Our Pillow. But I don't mind them working in a chiller mode because they didn't have to put out an album a year later. And so I feel like they just didn't rush the song, but they didn't have to put out an album a year later, but it doesn't feel like they had to dress up the songs to make them something they're not. It feels like they sat in the studio and did. But
it does still feel labored over though too at the same time.
Yeah.
It would. Let's go to the next one because it's so long and we can continue the line.
This next song is very long. We heard this one on tour. I think that we already established Read the Room as a big highlight of the concert, but I don't know if there was more excitement on the ride home from your hosts about anything.
No, and this
quite as much as there was this song. And I don't know if we should say why, because it's, I feel like we get something in this song that we haven't gotten from Johnny Greenwood since OK Computer, and that is a face-melting guitar solo.
Oh, so we should say why. Well, I was going to say for me, why though, before that, why it was all the highlight was because this was the closest to the stage I had gotten. So I finally had a perfect view. I was still, I don't know how many yards away, but we
were on the floor.
We were very close, and I'd gotten as close as I was going to get for the whole of the show. So just that on its own, was super special for me. Getting to see. Were
we still together at this point? Did we separate or?
We were.
Did the four of us move up
few
together?
People in between us? Yeah.
Okay.
No, we didn't. You hung back, and you also, being the chivalrous older brother that you are, you also we had eye contact, and you said, "I'll make sure I got Kailani close by." My wife's an independent person; she can handle herself, but she's a very slight to build person, and there's a giant Andre the Giant in front of her previously, so I got her to have my spot where she could see better, and I went in closer to the stage. And I
think that was probably why I stayed back, because if we were in a place where the ladies could see, it's like, let's not mess with it, because whenever I see a concert with a shorter person, I invariably at different points will get down to their eye level and see what they're seeing, and man, does it always make me recognize that being tall is a privilege.
Absolutely.
It's so annoying to go to a concert and not be able to see the fucking band.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that it's all, I'll cut myself off, Walker. You put up a hand and tap the sign if it's time to stop. But talking of that in a way to get empathy, listeners, watch the movie Silence of the Lambs. The way Jonathan Demme worked with actor Jodie Foster to do the character of the Curly Starling, you're always either at her eye level POV wise. Jodie Foster's 5 feet tall, just like my wife. And when she's in an elevator in an area surrounded by men, you get not their POV precisely. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're ogling her or whatever. But yeah, to Walker's point, it is interesting and can teach you some empathy to realize that tallness of any kind is a privilege.
This song is, I would say, this song, Read the Room, and Under Our Pillows are the and I suppose Friend of a Friend is a slightly different subcategory of rock, but these are the most rock and roll songs on the album.
Shoegazy.
And this one's very shoegazy. It's very, I think, and I mean this in the best possible way, it's very 90s.
Yeah.
This is a big 90s
100%.
rock song, as you'll hear, and I do think the take of the guitar solo that they use on the album is dope, but live it was like Nirvana, you know, just like feedback squealing, and they
it was Greenwood.
It's Greenwood. I mean, he plays guitar in a very distinct way, but it's 8 minutes and some change on the album, and live, I want to say that they played this thing for at least 10 minutes.
Yeah, I would say it was a little longer. I would say it's hard for me to actually be objective, of course, in any sense, but I do think the guitar take we got was a little more loud. So yeah, I'm gonna engage with the music until it comes.
And this bending. So the song's called Bending Hectic. I don't know if we said that, but this bending, both referred to in the title and being kind of matched in the guitar playing that's happening. This chord progression reminds me a little bit of like a Sonic Youth kind of, you know, giving it some dissonance with the bends, but it's very pretty. Lyrically, it's describing somebody driving their car off of a cliff on the Italian mountainside. Now, the Pitchfork article we've talked about a lot editorializes a bit and talks about a kind of disgraced person committing suicide with their car.
I noticed that.
And I think that's a great interpretation. I don't necessarily see anything in the lyrics that indicates the specificities of what kind of a person this is, but it definitely is about a person driving their car off a cliff. If it is a disgraced prominent person, I like thinking of it as a sequel to You Will Never Work in Television Again. Like the quote-unquote canceled
Italian prime minister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And right here, we're about to get some again, day in the life kind of sound orgasm here. Just let this go. That gives me chills, man.
And listeners, when this part was happening in the concert, because it's before the solo, I saw Johnny and I was like, I know how to do a G sharp. I could play one chord from the song.
Well, yeah. Also, not only that, but I mean, it's like we're hearing it for the first time live. We had no way of predicting that it was going to go into this, like, you know,
90s rock out.
90s rock out. Oh! The bend on Johnny's guitar matching vocally what he's doing is so cool.
Can we let the solo breathe a little bit when it comes?
Oh, yeah, big time. I just know we want to be mindful not to leave huge sections or we're not talking.
Of course.
Kicked off the platforms.
Oh, sure.
But no, let's let this guitar solo play. It's sick. And he's using a super long delay. I mean, in the studio, he might be doing multiple takes blended together. But live, you're getting the same thing where it's overlapping these different parts because he's just using super long delay and looping.
Now, this person is in the musical doghouse for writing music with no soul, but this has a major... You said Nirvana. I love Nirvana and Kurt Cobain. I don't think he was really much of a soloist. But it has that feeling.
Not in the technical sense, but it has that dirty.
Yes.
It has that dirty '90s rock feel. Because I don't think Greenwood's doing anything that's technically that challenging. I think both of us could play what he's playing. Could we come up with it? No. But we could play that.
Yeah, it's really advanced. It's very Rivers Cuomo a la Pinkerton to me.
Sure.
Tired of Sex is one of the coolest guitar solos from that era, period. I'm not saying it's one of the best, but whatever. The guitar work on Pinkerton is exquisite, and Rivers Cuomo is an exquisitely talented guitar player across many styles. That song has a very, very Pinkerton feel to me.
Yes,
not in the build up,
other
but
than
in that whole part.
No, that's good because I Rivers Cuomo is a great guitar player, but
Amazing.
he often goes for less improvised, more written, and more pristine. Very clean guitar solos, which are also great, but like the Blue album is, those are very clean sounding guitar solos, and on Pinkerton, it's just like wailing into your wailing 6 inches away from your amp, and that is
it has a very Tired of Sex feel a little bit to me.
Yeah, I dig that.
Anyways,
so we love Bending Hectic.
Yes.
Okay, this is the final song on this album. This is called You Know Me with an exclamation point at the end.
I've said it before. I think it was during our discussion on the Tom York solo album Tomorrow's Modern Boxes that punctuation in songs is an automatic mark in the lame column for me. It doesn't mean I prejudge the song, but I'm not a fan of exclamation points in songs.
See, I kind of like it.
Rule. I don't like punctuation in songs. Besides like an ellipses or something like that.
I especially like it for a band like this because to me it's like it takes things a little less seriously, and I think I have no problem with the seriousness of Tom York's songwriting. I think that's well covered. We've talked about how what is perceived as depressive nature to his music is used as a knock against it, and to me it's a strength. I like the seriousness of The Smile and Radiohead, but I don't mind when he does something to let the air out of that a little bit. And to me, putting a exclamation point in a song that sounds like this is a little bit of a funny contrast. This song doesn't sound like it's being sang with an exclamation point. So I don't.
No, not at all. I think the reason why is because I'm a very literal person, and sometimes it feels like adding punctuation that definitive into something it leaves even just the title itself less open for interpretation, which is my own limitation. And I'm also just being silly and trying to elicit a laugh that didn't happen. But Walker, I know we mentioned him when we were talking about our list of prog rock or progressive rock musicians of the now or of their era. I think I think on this and Teleharmonic, I hear quite a Peter Gabriel influence.
Oh, I think that. Yeah.
And more so in the background noises than the singing. I've talked about in comparing Tom York to Peter Gabriel in the past, that if you were to they have such different vocal registers at times. Peter Gabriel has a wonderful falsetto as well, but just very different. This reminds me of just a song that could be on So or even on Us, or on. Yeah, I love this.
Right there, drops the reverb out of his voice and suddenly
Beautiful.
sounds very close to the mic, whisper.
Like Give Up the Ghost, or like the beautiful track from Kid A.
This again, How to Disappear Completely. This again, to me, pretty directly sounds like the sonic palette of King of Limbs.
Very much, and particularly in the Give Up the Ghost range, even though different instrumentation being highlighted.
Here's my take on this song. I love it. I actually love this song. It's so mellow that I wouldn't mind if it's a little bit of a videotape situation where it's fleshed out a bit more live. Like, I wouldn't mind if after that You Know Me and it's like silent for a second, I wouldn't mind if it kind of like kicked in a little more Foley there. But it's so pretty and so nice that I can't really complain too much. I just wouldn't mind if it was interpreted differently live. I think it's a cool end to the album. I think this string section mimicking his kind of vocal improvisations a la Pyramid Song is really cool. Lyrically, it's about being observed seemingly through the online portal.
Going with the title of the album.
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds like it's about somebody famous, like Tom York, being on the other side of these parasocial relationships that we have with people who are in bands or on TV or, simply influencers.
Hosting podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, it sounds like it's taking the piss a little bit out of the fans. Not really in a mean way, but just even almost neutrally commenting on the strangeness of being observed by millions of people who, in fact, do not know you and feel as if they do. I think we, a great deal on this episode and every episode of our Radiohead season, have speculated about Tom's feelings and thoughts and desires and things he's going through. And, some of those things are gleaned from stuff he has said, but a lot of it is our speculation. And always with the caveat of reminding ourselves and our audience that we do not, in fact, know these people on a personal level. But I'm completely susceptible to, honestly, especially with podcasts. Zach and I talk about the hosts of podcasts we both listen to each other on a first name basis regularly. Yeah. Oh, could you tell so-and-so was a little off on this episode, et cetera? Well, he did just, I hope everything's okay in his marriage. No,
just the other day, Walker and I were talking about the Joe Rogan Experience, and I was like, man, could you tell Joe,
his supplements were wearing off. He sounded really stupid on this one.
Yeah, and how about Jordan Peterson with his anger about the woke mob? Didn't that appeal to you, Walker, as it did
up
to me?
yours, woke moralists.
Yeah,
we'll see who cancels who. You know me.
Just kidding, listeners.
What do you think of You Know Me? I love it.
Well, I was gonna go along with what you were saying with the parasocial relationships. Listeners, if you thought I was serious, we don't listen to Joe Rogan together. But no, more. But
no, we listen to it separately for 8 hours a day,
but equally. But yeah, I think that one of the things that you were saying, though, like, it's present on Anima. Guys or folks, it goes all the way back to OK Computer, and I'm sure before then, because they were experiencing fame since Pablo Honey, but a different kind of grappling with that. I love the way, in my opinion, Tom, as a songwriter and as a lyricist in particular, can comment upon the frustration, the dejection with fame and all that goes with it, the internal conflict of making all this money but being an activist for causes that people might think of as tax the rich or whatever. He's never commented on the conundrum on that besides on meeting people is easy. But I just know, I think that there are two sides to probably how he feels about a lot of all this, among many. Even on the Eraser, I forget if it's Skip Divided or a different song, but you were talking about how you think that that it kind of is like glad handing bullshit and like stuff that you have to deal with as a symptom or as a product rather of being highly successful. And I just want to say to that, like when I see, I'm not somebody who scrolls YouTube for so-and-so loses his at press, because if it's somebody I really like, it's hard to usually see them have such a human moment. But when I do, unless it's somebody assaulting somebody or whatever, I'm like, I get it, man. And I don't excuse the behavior, but if it's somebody like Tom Hanks shouting at a paparazzi because they won't fucking leave Rita Wilson alone, I get it. It's hard to see Tom Hanks get mad. Not like he's my favorite, whatever. But I get it. And it's like,
but no, the discomfort of seeing people's humanity in that way, people who were used to experiencing in a way that is, them being performative for us in a way that's more pleasing. It can be really off-putting. That's why so many people's take on a celebrity after they've interacted with them is like, oh, that guy's a dick, because maybe they weren't that warm, or maybe they were a dick. Maybe they were being a dick that day, and I'm not excusing it either.
To be
but
up
it's like,
though in some way,
right? And also, and I'm just saying, whether they were or weren't being a dick, we don't necessarily like encountering the humanity of people that we want to experience as, performers.
And so I think the irony,
like Tom complaining that it was cold through that whole show.
Well, yeah, I think that may have bothered you more than it did me, because I was just thought it, or I know we both thought it was funny, but like that's different though than if I saw Tom interacting with I would be thrown into of like, man, that really, really bummed me out. If it was something where I saw Tom saying fuck off to just a fan who had waited out in the cold or whatever, I'm sure he's probably done stuff like that. Folks, we all do stuff that we're ashamed and regret. Some to more severity than others. But if you don't have anything in your life that you're ashamed of and don't regret, then you don't have the ability to reflect. We all have that to some degree, and we should. And I think like what this explores in so many of them, since Radiohead and The Smile and them as individual, Tom as a songwriter of achieved fame, is that back and forth. And you already fleshed it out brilliantly, but I just love that through line from The Eraser, from OK Computer and Anima, and now to this. He's so great at exploring he knows that he's not, I feel like he writes like he's not a part of the common class. Woke up today, drove my truck, my lumber truck or whatever. He's not trying to relate to the common man in some way that would come off so cringy. Instead, I think he's illustrating that he is exposed to all of this upper tier glad handing bullshit, and writes about it with a profound sense of disconnected disconcert, which is a very wise way to approach it. I think still connect with your audience. So that's my take on that song.
That is Wall of Eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting album. I'm still getting to know it. But today, my take on it is I personally think it's even a little stronger than A Light for Attracting Attention. I like that to me, it feels more like an album than A Light for Attracting Attention, which feels a bit like a disparate collection of songs. Again, that's not really a knock on the first album. I think that was very appropriate for that band introducing itself to, basically probably to not a lot of new fans, basically to Radiohead fans, as like, this is what we're doing now. It also was a pandemic album. And so it being like kind of like long and dense and just going like, how many tracks did you say it is? 13?
13. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that feels also very appropriate to me of like, it's like, hey, we're going to fucking sit around and watch Tiger King. Like, I'll also give this like it's just due and really spend time with it. But I just happen to like that this feels a little more consumable as a cohesive album that is, again, as I said, to me, it kind of like in the middle there, peaks in terms of like now we're a bit more into like a rock and roll album, and is bookended by songs that are smaller and more constrained, but it all really works. It really flows together. Criticisms of Under Our Pillow aside, I don't even really think that song disrupts the flow of the album. I just happen to not particularly like that song, but where it's placed and everything and the kind of song it is, I actually think it still fits. So I'm a huge fan of this album. I'm going to be listening to it a lot more. I'm pretty curious to kind of bring A Light for Attracting Attention back in and listen a bit more comparatively. Not that I feel that I necessarily need to rank these things as one being better than the other, but I'm kind of like excited about additional data on this band to be like, what are they doing album to album? And it makes me get excited about crafting kind of my expectations about what they'll do next. I don't think they're going anywhere. I don't think we'll get a new Radiohead album before we get a new Smile album. I hope they tour. I hope when they tour, they play a bunch of shit that could be on their third album. I'm really, really excited about getting to follow this band in real time, and they have not disappointed me so far.
I definitely agree with that last two sentences of really getting to follow them in real time. I'm sorry, excited to... What was the last two things you said?
Really excited I get to follow this band in real time as a fan from the inception, and so far I have not been disappointed. It's giving me everything that I would hope for from, hey,
Mhm.
Johnny Greenwood and Tom York have a new band.
I loved that. I really, really have an affection for the album myself, but because I think we have a lot of overlap, but a lot of differences too. I love hearing that you're so enthusiastic for it, and I really mean that. I have not spent a lot of time on like the Radiohead the Smile subreddit to see if there's a lot of debate. Not because I was banned, that was weeks ago. But that is going to tie back into my overall thoughts, honestly, and listeners might be stunned by the callback. But I have one word on this album, and that's mixed. My overall feeling towards the album is exactly that. It's mixed, but in Tom York and Johnny Greenwood context. And this came up when we were talking about in our episode Rankiohead, where we ranked all the albums of Radiohead, our season 1 finale. Listeners, go back and listen to it. But basically, mixed, or albums that are lower in our favor, is different than mixed in any other capacity, right? When I say a movie is mixed, the movie Prometheus for me is mixed, right? This is not that. On a spectrum,
you're grading on a curve of Radiohead. Yeah,
exactly. Or Tom York and Johnny Greenwood music, more, just to give the Smile their due. On a spectrum of bad to good or good to bad, mix is typically I would say thought to be closer to bad. This is not the case for the Smile or with Radiohead for that matter, right? So if I say something's mixed, it's in that context, as you just said. The choices they make are so brave and still, I would say, new to me, completely unpredictable, and really suit themselves to repeated listens, just like we said in the intro. I have a quick, sentence here from Tom Doyle of the Mojo article that I like so much. And I think he summarized some of what my feelings are so well. So I'm just going to read that real quick. He says, all in all, less immediate and traditionally melodic than a light for attracting attention, Wall of Eyes is one for the heads, revealing its many charms and details only upon repeated listens. I love that. I love when music journalists talk about the value of repeated listens and listen to the whole albums. At 8 tracks, it feels a tad slighter than its predecessor, but similarly shouldn't be mistaken for an extracurricular indulgence. Let us not forget that it's been 8 years, the entire recording lifespan of the Beatles since A Moon-Shaped Pool. Until Radiohead return, or even if they never return or regroup, the Smile will do just nicely. I don't agree with every single point he makes there, but I just think that's really well said. And I'd like to, from there, lead into specifically where the album falters for me, unless you have anything to interject.
No, please.
So this is where it falters for me. So I think the sequencing is clunky, a little clunky. And I have in my notes, and this is no longer true, I was going to say I don't love the ballady songs quite so much. But as we talked about, Friend of a Friend before today has really, really grown in my esteem. I love Teleharmonic, and I don't know that's ballady. It's just slower. The last song is a little ballady maybe. So it's not that I don't love or appreciate those.
But you were into You Know Me, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
Okay.
like them. I'm just not. They don't, to me, hit. Well, just keep that in mind as I go into my next part. So,
okay.
When thinking about where the album falters and me maybe in general appealing less to the ballady songs, I'm reminded of a Roger Ebert quote that I love so much: "Do not review the movie you wanted to see. Review the movie you saw." Some variation of this quote actually goes to Orson Welles, but I love that he gave that advice. You see that so much now. Why couldn't they have done Star Wars this way? Why couldn't? But I think in the context that he was saying, and Orson Welles especially, is, hey, if you wrote the film, don't review the movie that you wanted from your writings. Review the movie that was made. Mm-hmm. It applies to any era and any time. It's just amazing that he had the foresight to say that. So keeping that approach in mind, I have nothing bad to say about the album. Even the songs, the song Under Our Pillows that I don't really love. I stand in awe of the fact that these two men in their early to mid 50s are making such challenging and exciting music. And it's exciting not only by musical standards in general, but also in comparison to latter-day Radiohead. I find this album more exciting, or the Smile overall more exciting than like A Moon-Shaped Pool. There's more to chew on for me. Unfortunately, we have been treated to alternate content that could have made this album. Walker and I directly. And this ties back to the Radiohead or Smile Reddit thing. I'm not bragging, listeners. You can experience that alternate content as well. And those songs, by the way, are Colors Fly, Just Eyes and Mouth, Feeling Pulled Apart by Horses.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So So we've been treated to that, listeners. You can treat yourself. I'm not being a superior here.
Oh, and Just Eyes and Mouth is that very like groovy. It almost like he was playing the synth and dancing. It's like very like it was almost kind of like 80s synth rock type of a song.
Yes, but the Greenwood riff was really bouncy, like what we heard
that
on
was
Colors
a cool
Fly.
song.
But that song was amazing.
It could still end up on an album though.
Yeah, you didn't love Colors Fly. I really liked that one. It's to me, it's a much better version of Under Our Pillows, but we're not going to dwell on it. So, Roger Deber's quote: I need to review what was given to us, not what could have been." But it is relevant because I've tried really hard to listen to Wall of Eyes as it is and as it's been presented to us, not with the instead of mindset. Like Casey Pegram said, like don't listen to, or he tries not to listen to music like what we could have been given instead of. But in this case, there's a very, very clear picture of what we could have been given, and it's really difficult for me to understand why the following songs didn't make the final cut. I just mentioned them: Colors Fly, Just Eyes and Mouth, Feeling Pulled Apart by Horses, especially those last two. These songs, besides Read the Room, represented a further shift into the math rock and like harder edge songs that the Smile have dabbled in on A Light for Attracting Attention, and represent some of my favorite guitar music I've ever heard. Grading the album on its own merit, it's an 85 to 90% for me. The songs are really, really good. Some are great. Thinking about it with the mindset of what could have been / will I listen to it its entirety the way I do A Light for Attracting Attention, it is much more on the mixed spectrum, but mixed still being by Tom and Johnny standards. I vastly prefer A Light for Attracting Attention to this. Okay. Except for Read the Room, which I think is up there with some of my favorite Radiohead tracks. And it's just a little puzzling to me why Feeling Pulled Apart by Horses and Just Eyes and Mouth didn't make the cut to round out the album at 10 songs. They made the album they wanted to make. I felt this way about Phantom Thread when it came out. Why did P.T. Anderson make another movie with Daniel Day-Lewis? That is boring. Now it's one of my favorites. So this is the downside to doing a discussion so close to its release. But I'm pretty firm in the fact that I think they should have rounded it out with more guitar music. And I don't think the sequencing is very good. I think it's a very odd opener to open with Wall of Eyes. I think that would have made a better closer. And I just think it needs a little bit more excitement. But there's no other band. I mean, I love U2 so much. Their music sounds so samey at this point. And I do listen to it. I cannot believe that people at this age and stage in their career are making such challenging and adventurous music. And I would like to take a breath because that was a lot. So that's it.
I mean, I really like that we have different reactions to the album. I'm glad we both appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And yeah,
do you think I'm being too harsh?
No, I think it's how you feel. And like, I don't mean that dismissively. I don't feel that way. I think that I feel like we both like every flavor of Tom York songwriting, but I get more excited about the, like, I don't know, like if you look at our top 10 Radiohead songs or whatever, and it's like your favorite is, don't tell me because I know, your favorite is I Might Be Wrong, and my favorite is No Surprises. I love I Might Be Wrong. You love No Surprises, but I think they also show which tendencies of his songwriting get us the most excited. And I think the mathematical, riff-driven guitar rock does a lot for you. And the kind of more soft-spoken meditations do a lot for me. And so I really like that the experience of seeing the Smile live ended up being so different than this album. It's not that I wish that seeing them live,
like that too.
Yeah. And totally. I think you're giving it complete justice and being very considered in your remarks about it. But I don't wish that seeing them live was more like this album experience, but I was pleasantly surprised when I was like, oh, weird. They're doing something way chiller. And a bunch of the songs we didn't see are kind of setting the tone of this album. And not only that, the ones we did see are kind of outliers as the heaviest songs on the album. Read the Room and Bending Hectic are probably the two heaviest songs on this album. And they're, I believe, 2 of 4 songs that we saw them doing on the road. The rest, the other half of the album is all, totally unknown material to us. So I have no problem with anything you're saying, but I also, this definitely feels like one for me in terms of the tone that he's going for on this one, that they're going for. And in fact, the stuff that I like a little less to me feels more like, I'm like, did Johnny write this song? And I have nothing but admiration for Johnny Greenwood, but I just am like, oh, this feels more like it's on here because it's fun for him to play than
such as
Under Our Pillow. I mean, again, I really like everything on the album except for that. So it's like any examples I have of what I'm saying.
Well, Read the Room feels very much of a Johnny Greenwood composition.
I agree. And that's very succcefore for me. So it's not, okay, got it. I'm not really knocking Johnny. I'm just saying that like where Johnny would take albums that are 90% as good twice as quickly. I will take things that are 90% as ambitious to be twice as beautiful. And so I'm like, even if they put out another Radiohead album and it's like, wow, this is really a step back in terms of ambition, but the melodies are beautiful and the lyrics speak to me and it sounds great, I guarantee that's going to be my favorite album of like that 5-year period, So this just the stuff, there is stuff where I feel like they're doing things that are new and ambitious that really work for me. And then there's stuff on here that I'm just like, oh, it's just a great Tom York song. And that is going to do a lot of the work in giving any project he does a high rating for me.
I love all that. I love it.
Yeah. Anything else you would like to say?
I would just like to say, going off of kind of our overall feelings, thank you to any new listeners that came along for this episode. And thank you to folks that have found the podcast, that have sent Walker and I emails. It was, we've gotten a few just saying, hey, when are you going to talk about Wall of Eyes? That meant the world that anyone solicited our future feedback or future thoughts on the album. When we started this, our hope was just that people would listen and engage with it. I wouldn't say I never dreamed of, but it really, really is just so awesome to hear that this podcast has been a light for attracting assholes. No, I'm just kidding. A light for just a good thing in people's life. That means the world. And that was definitely not a goal that we set out. But just, it was so great to hear. And thank you. Just thanks for sending those letters and asking for saying you were excited for us to talk about this album, because I knew that we were excited. But knowing that there are folks out there that want to hear Walker and Zach gab about it means the world. So thank you, listeners. Tell a friend if you like the show and they like good music. And Walker, I loved listening to this together. Did not know how you felt about it, listeners. We did a great job. So it was really, really fun to hear about what stood out to you. And I hope the same for you as well.
Ditto to everything you said. This was so enjoyable. I was really looking forward to getting to do this. And the fact that there are folks who are feeling the absence of this show as we are, in between
on
seasons.
Hiatus.
Yeah. It's just really, really, really touching. And I would encourage folks, if you were looking for contemporary commentary on the new Smile album and this is what you found and it's your first episode, please go back, listen to all the Radiohead content, listen to all the Fiona Apple content. Zach and I are continuing to deal with life on life's terms, which means we're both very busy with lots of different things. And right now we're going to be resting and plotting our triumphant return. But in the meantime, there's a lot of content there for you to engage with. And it's not goodbye, it's see you later, as my co-host has often said. Oh, I guess I'll do one last thing. If you love us and you're missing us, I'm a stand-up comedian. Follow me on Instagram at WalkerJFGlenn. Coming to a town near you if you live in Northern California. And if you don't, follow me and you can watch me do stand-up online since that's the way things are done these days. Zach, do you have any plugs? Any place you want people to find you?
No, I don't. Listen to this podcast and look me up in the directories or your yellow pages, and maybe you'll have some luck.
All right. We love you, listeners. I love you, brother. And we will talk to you later. Bye.
Adios.
Idiotalk is a Glenn Brothers production. Get in touch with us at idiotalk.podcast@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at idiotalk.podcast. And thanks for listening to